say to my colleague, just with federal employees.
Who the fuck is this withered old mother? Like, why do all of our ruling class officials look the same? He looks like a dry ass turkey.
Whose goal is to get out in the woods and help prevent fire in Oregon. I organized this meeting. They too are terrified. They've dedicated their lives to trying to help. Now,
and what is this? What is this? Look, they all dress the same. What is this fucking purple on purple, bro? Purple on purple, purple. What is this? What is this tie pattern?
we serve the American people.
No, you don't. You serve the imperialist ruling class. Who are you, anyways?
And I'm telling you, I've seen service in action over the last few hours with your reflecting the urgency of our times. Our salaries are paid for by taxpayers, and I'm particularly troubled by the fact that we're getting all these reports that many senators are saying, I'm not going to do town hall meetings.
Because they keep getting shouted down. Like I saw this guy from Nebraska. I can't remember his name, Chuck something or other. But he was like he couldn't even get a word in edgewise. Like when you're afraid to face the people that you claim to represent, the people that Mr. Turkey, Senator Turkey, just said that you paid to represent. Like when you're afraid to go to the masses, when you're afraid to talk to the people, that's a sign that you're not really a representative of the people. You are paid to represent and further the interests of the imperialists. You're paid to further and represent the interests of Fortune 500 corporations. You don't give a shit about the people. You just get in front of you just get up here in the fucking House chamber, in the Senate chamber, and yap and run your mouth like Cory Booker is about to do in a few minutes. You yap and you run your mouth acting like you give a fuck, but you really don't give a fuck. You condemn the people that actually do give a fuck. You condemn the people that are actually trying to do shit to change this horrible world in which we live. And yeah, it's just a clusterfuck. Like these people are playing in your face. They're playing worse and worse in your face every day. And it's up to you to realize it, and it's up to you to act accordingly.
They're on the other side of the aisle. As I said, I've had 1,100 of them, 10 of them so far this year. Seems to me that's refusing to answer to constituents. And you've been here all night, and you're setting a...
And America just slapped a 37% tariff on Serbia.
Very clear example about what it means to push back against authoritarianism. So just like I have town hall meetings, my question...
I want to go to Mr. Turkey's town hall meeting just to tell him he looks like a fucking dry-ass turkey.
My friend from New Jersey is, what are you hearing from home? Pretty straightforward question, but it sure as heck is what the times are all about. Because
sure as
people
heck.
are saying, what are you doing back there? What's important to you? And I talk about town meetings. I had a town hall, I say to my friend, during the speech that was made on the floor of the House. I had 30,000 people participating. That's a lot.
Oh, wow. Dude is like at the lowest level of Twitch streaming. So, yeah, you guys have talked about it in chat, but Trump just announced sweeping new tariffs on all imports. So what does this mean for you? Well, the price of shit that you need is going to go up. I think he hit Taiwan, too, which is where all of our computers should, all of our semiconductors and stuff come from. So what exactly did Trump do? Trump's policy will put in place a baseline 10% tariff on all goods from all countries except those compliant with the USMCA free trade agreement between Mexico, Canada, and the United States. Non-compliant goods will continue to be charged at a 25% rate. Importers of goods from other nations will begin paying the 10% tariff on Saturday at 12:01 a.m. Eastern Time. A group of about 60 or so countries, which senior Trump administration officials labeled the worst offenders, will be charged a tariff at half the rate they charge the United States. These reciprocal tariffs will go into effect April 9th at 12:01 a.m. Eastern Time, according to a senior White House official. So yeah, foreign automobiles. I imagine that includes the parts as well, because Trump wants to address so-called horrendous imbalances that have impacted the country's industrial base and put national security at risk. So talking about that industrial base, America gutted its industrial base with its turn to neoliberal politics, neoliberal trade policies in the late 70s, okay? The Reagan era really started with Jimmy Carter. rest in piss. So people keep acting like all we have to do is reopen the steel plants, reopen the car plants. That's not going to happen because these imperialist corporations, Ford, General Motors, Tesla, all these places, they seek cheap labor, they seek cheap materials, they seek cheap goods. Okay? They're not going to reopen shit back up in the United States ever because it hurts their bottom line to do so. So all of this neo-protectionist bullshit, it's not going to work. All it's going to do is make shit more expensive for you because the imperialist corporations are never, ever, ever going to take a pay cut. That's what's going to happen. Trump knows this, but that's what happens when you have right-wing populism / fascism and Declaration of Economic Independence. We're going to see. We're going to see. We're going to see. It's a declaration of war on the working class. It's a declaration of war on the poor, who are now going to have to pay a shitload of extra money for goods that used to be relatively cheap. This is really good, really good short video for my comrade on Nancy's Library. You should follow them on Twitter, and you should also follow them on YouTube because they're really good at like searching and making videos about not so well-known events in history and not so well-known movements that that you should know about.
When I wrote this script,
So this is what the student resistance needs to learn from Ethiopians. What happened in Ethiopia? Let's find out.
it was originally a zine entitled On Campus Rebellion, Lessons from the Ethiopian Student Movement. That zine and this video are intended to do the same thing, though the video will be a little more modern in its analysis, as the zine was written well over a year ago. I wrote the initial zine while protesting alongside students at UCLA's pro-Palestine encampment. This protest encampment lasted roughly 7 days. It involved thousands of students and allies at its height, if not more. Almost 2 years ago.
Pausing this for a little bit. Sorry, Nancy. We'll get back to them later. But if you're into reading, like I am, and you should be, there's a really good book written by an old comrade of mine, Ian Horst, that talks about the revolutionary left in Ethiopia. So, if you know anything about Ethiopia, up until the mid-70s, it was governed by a dictator. And I understand that some of my Rastafarian / whatever comrades will take issue to this, but Haile Selassie was basically a dictator, okay? Like, this dude literally held banquets in the Jubilee Palace while millions of his people were going through famine and all types of other horrible shit. And any attempts at reform, there's actually a high-ranking Ethiopian noble, they call him the Red Ras. I believe his name was Ras Sayum, but the Red Ras, he actually tried to, like, get Haile Selassie to make land reform and do a bunch of other good stuff, well, relatively good stuff for a feudal monarchy. Well, Haile Selassie was an empire, was an emperor, so I guess we could call it the empire. But he tried to get Haile Selassie to do relatively good shit, and the reformist wing was met with all types of repression and beatings and all types of horrible shit. So the title of this book is Like Ho Chi Minh, Like Che Guevara. I highly recommend you check it out because, yeah. And also what came after Haile Selassie was a pseudo-fascist military regime led by a fellow named Mengistu Haile Mariam, who surprisingly is still alive. He's like old as dirt, but he lives in exile in Zimbabwe right now, because if he goes back to Ethiopia, he will probably be flayed and beaten to death. Flayed alive and beaten to death. So, yeah. It basically talks about the struggle against the Derg regime led by Mengistu and all types of other stuff. But I've skimmed it. I haven't given it a thorough reading. I'm currently reading T.E. Lawrence's 7 Pillars of Wisdom. Why are you reading this old English imperialist book? Well, because he helped organize the Arabs in World War I for a guerrilla war against the Ottoman Empire. So I'm a military nerd. Anything about guerrilla warfare as a Maoist, I think should be read. So, yeah, check that out. So back to Anansi.
I posted a video
Derg was indeed the Ethiopian Empire with the Red Star.
essay / documentary on the Ethiopian Revolution. particularly spending the bulk of the video discussing the student movement that precluded and lasted throughout the revolution. As I worked on this project, I got the idea to take what I had learned there and write something arguing for increased organization and protest among students in America, and taking tactics, ideas, and lessons from the Ethiopian student movement. Providence saw fit to beat me to the punch, and the movement I sought to write about came to birth before me. My goal now is to discuss the Ethiopian student movement, the only student movement in history that successfully deposed an emperor, and what tactics we can learn from them and apply here in America, but also, in the same vein, discuss the progression and current state of the student movement here in America a bit. So first, a brief history, and then 6 lessons that I think we could take from the Ethiopian student movement. The initial outburst of the student encampments across the country in 2024 were met with a wave of violence from both the state and state-adjacent civilian militia violence. None of the over 120...
Not enough people talk about the fact that, like, at UCLA, they literally had deputized Zionist fascist gangs that were allowed to go in and basically beat the shit out of old people. Like, they had one older lady that was, she was in front of the encampment, and they literally just mobbed her and beat the crap out of her. And I strongly encourage communists and those that aspire to be communists to, like, when videos of stuff like this happen, study them closely with your comrades and discuss what went well and what went wrong, because this shit is coming back. Like, we've still got several more decades of this shit until we are finally free. So knowledge of tactics, knowledge of organizing, knowledge of how to actually defeat our enemies is extremely important. How do you learn how to defeat our enemies? By watching our enemies in motion.
21 established encampments are still standing, Cal State LA's encampment being among the longest lasting. The waves...
A comrade mentioned that they just finished Urasami Burton's Tip of the Spear about Attica and the New York prison revolts in the 70s. I just want to mention that is a very, very good book.
The violence from the state and otherwise were ultimately successful in destroying these encampments, and yet part of my goal with this project is to explain why that's not necessarily a setback. It is the hope of the state that by breaking up our encampments and shocking us with overwhelming and nakedly illegal violence, that we will...
I mentioned this earlier, like, why is Trump moving so fucking fast? Like, why is Elon Musk, who he's apparently fallen out with, like, why are these people moving so fast? Why are they just throwing shit after shit after shit after shit after shit at us? Because they want us to be so confused. They want us to be like the shittiest of firemen that are just running around putting out little brush fires, ignoring the big conflagration right behind us. We have to be strategic. Like, we can't just be popping up, being like, okay, we're going to burn ourselves out on this one week, and then we're going to burn ourselves out on that next week. That's a way to lose. Like, you cannot make a revolution. You cannot fight against a fascist regime. If we live under a fascist regime, if you don't believe that we live under a fascist regime, you have not been paying attention. If you think that any of this has a happy, peaceful ending, okay? So, we live under a fascist regime. So to topple strategic fascism, you have to apply strategic communism, strategic Marxism, Leninism, Maoism. Otherwise, you're going to be crushed. You're going to be burnt out. You're going to constantly be getting arrested. You're going to see our best leaders, our best revolutionaries, our best militants being shuffled into prison for 30 and 40-year bids. We cannot afford that. As Fred Hampton said, as George Jackson said, we have to defend ourselves. We have to defend our movements, and we have to defend those who have put themselves out there as leadership and who are accepted as leadership by the masses. Like, people are constantly talking about who is the vanguard. I am the vanguard. This organization is the vanguard. PSL is the vanguard. DSA is the vanguard. There is no vanguard unless millions and millions of people acknowledge you as such. Why is the Chinese Communist Party the vanguard? Why is the Communist Party of the Philippines the vanguard of the Filipino Revolution? Why was the Black Panther Party the vanguard? Because millions of people acknowledge them as such. The Black Panther Party could literally go into the neighborhood and be like, you, and you. You're selling papers today. And people would follow them because they knew that the Panthers were for real. They knew that the Panthers were about that life. If you're not about that life, then the people are not going to follow you. I'm sorry.
Be too consumed by our fear to continue protesting. This was the same mentality of one Haile Selassie, the former emperor of Ethiopia, when his...
Boo. So a lot of people literally worship this guy, the Rastafarians. But like a lot of Pan-Africans, a lot of people who like, here's the thing with Africa. Africa has been so fucked for so long in so many ways, horrible ways, that anybody that just stands up and is like, hey, this is my fucking country, you're not going to take it over, like, they are lionized. they are seen as near gods. They are gods in the Rastafarian sense. Like they literally believe that Haile Selassie is the Messiah. They call him Jah, God for a reason. But being a dialectical materialist, we realized that this guy was a feudal emperor. Yes, he did play a somewhat semi-progressive role in fighting against Italian imperialism that tried to reduce his country to a vassal state, to a suzerainty. But afterwards and before, he was a feudal dictator. Like, there's really no reason why we need to applaud Haile Selassie's policies or why we should literally be viewing this guy as God. He played a semi-progressive role for a little bit of history. And it's to the eternal discredit of the Comintern that they really did not pay all that much attention to the struggle in Ethiopia, and they did not organize an international brigade like they did for Spain, because Ethiopia was really the first throwdown with fascism in the immediate lead up to World War II. But the Comintern did not organize a military detachment. It was left to the British to help realize the vindication of Ethiopia. So, yeah. Lesson to learn from.
His regime.
This is actually talked about in False Nationalism, False Internationalism, by the way.
Went head-to-head with the students in running street battles in 1960.
And yeah, Haile Selassie did go to Yugoslavia. He was a big supporter of the non-aligned movement, even though he was also a puppet of Yankee and British imperialism. But yeah, I believe he was not at Tito's funeral because he died before Tito. The way he died was pretty shitty too. The Derg basically smothered him to death with a pillow and then buried him up under an outhouse.
66. The cause of this uprising was the leaking of images from the Shola concentration camp, a place where the Ethiopian government had been hiding homeless populations in order to pretend that poverty didn't exist in the country.
Does that sound familiar?
This was essentially a secret concentration camp where Ethiopia's unhoused population was forcibly detained in Addis Ababa, the capital city of Ethiopia. Students protested and demonstrated against this cruelty, demanding freedom, better conditions, and the alleviation of poverty for the unhoused. The emperor's regime responded by tear gassing and beating students. The battle culminated at Ras Mekonnen Bridge, where students successfully resisted the police's attempt to dissipate the protest. The police failed, and the students refused to be cowed by fascist violence from them. The camp was later closed, and those who found themselves detained at Shola concentration camp personally went to the campus to thank the students for fighting on their behalf. The role of poverty and homelessness in being a point of organization for students is somewhat mirrored by the prevalence of organization around homelessness and countering hostile federal policy toward the unhoused here in the US. The confrontation at Ras Mekonnen Bridge is an excellent place to examine police tactics that still take place today. It is common to, in this day and age, avoid marches and protests that take us across bridges or through tunnels. Places like these, long lanes with no side streets or escapes that provide for limited movement, are extremely dangerous places to protest because police kettles are easily established. The students' success at Ras Mekonnen Bridge is mostly attributed to a lack of experience on the part of the police and a unified willingness to fight through a potential kettle, factors absent from modern versions of this situation, in much of my experience. Kettling is a police crowd control tactic, where they attempt to herd a crowd of people into a specific area, then cut off their...
Ras Imru was the Red Ras. I think Ras Sayum was a traitor. That's what happens when everybody's named Ras. I don't know Gez, Harak. So, yeah. Ethiopian comrades, please don't flay me alive.
Potential escape routes. This is usually best done on a bridge or in a tunnel, as it only has 2 points of failure, and getting a large crowd to turn around is a slow process. It is an effective tactic at stopping marches, as a relatively small force of officers can contain a massive group via intimidation, then slowly release people to kill a protest's momentum and manpower. This is also its weakness, however, as a unified group that is willing to fight can overwhelm...
Yeah, this guy, Ras Imru. He was a crown counselor and served as ambassador to India, the United States, and the Soviet Union. He was a modernist and reformist, and also deeply religious. He began to lean towards a left-of-center political stance that would probably have classified him as a socialist in the Western European sense. He was nicknamed the Red Ras because he gave away his own feudal estates to his tenant farmers. But he didn't like the fact that the Derg deposed his boy. Obviously, because like all of these people were related. But yeah, I guess the most progressive of the Ethiopian feudal monarchs.
Ethiopian feudal
Ethiopian feudal monarchical regime.
in a matter of seconds and force a retreat. Ethiopian students faced escalating methods of repression by the Ethiopian regime, some aspects of which mirror our own experience. In 1962, students who wrote poetry critical of the regime were berated and had their speech suppressed and were subjected to checks by the regime before publication. It is vital.
Jim, this guy that people constantly laud as being like the father of Pan-Africanism, like Marcus Garvey loved this dude. Fred Hampton called him that little punk in Ethiopia for this exact reason. He was a feudal despot who was more obsessed with holding on to power than actually serving his people. So, yeah, nobody liked this guy in his own country. So that's why he ended up toppled.
Vital to note that faculty who did not stand in solidarity with students acted as the first arm of state violence and repression against students.
This mirrors Colombia, where you literally have faculty turning in undocumented students, undocumented Arab students to ICE. Like, imagine paying to go to one of the best universities in the world, or getting yourself into atrocious, noxious debt. Okay, that's what I consider student loans. Noxious debt. You should not have to go into incredible amounts of debt. As a matter of fact, you should not have to go into any debt to obtain an education. But you get yourself in all this noxious debt to attend Columbia or Yale or Harvard or Columbia. And what happens? You literally get snitched on for standing up for what is right. For standing up for what is right. And people are like, oh, they don't support Hamas. Okay, like, even if they do support Hamas, that's First Amendment protected speech. That's First Amendment protected speech. Just because somebody is not a citizen of the United States, just because somebody has a green card and is a permanent resident, that does not mean that you get to treat them like shit. That does not mean that they are second-class people, okay? Everybody that enters this country is covered by the Constitution. Everybody that enters this country has rights, or should have rights. So imagine you pay all this money. You come to this country that you've been told is dope throughout your whole life, even though through your own experience you realize that it's not all that dope, and you get snitched out by the person that you pay to educate you. That's the person that you pay to grade your fucking papers, the person that you pay to set you on a path that makes you a better thinker. They rat you out to ICE.
Going so far as to render students who lived on campus homeless in response to their participation in protests. Protesting students were frequently suspended, and the regime would often simply close the entire campus for all students in order to silence resistance.
Sound familiar? It should.
These tactics have been mirrored by many campuses in the U.S. in order to suppress student activity.
So if you can't read that, this says, UCLA, attention, no events are permitted in this area today per policy 852. This location is not designated for public expression activities. Wow, that's a dystopian as fuck term. Public expression activities. Individuals participating in an event or a public expression activity in this area are subject to discipline and or arrests. And to cap off the dystopian fucking sandwich board, they have a QR code that says scan for policy information.
UCLA students have found their ability to protest on campus vastly limited both by new restrictions, whose violation is subject.
Note that UCLA is a public university. Like, this isn't Stanford, okay? UCLA, University of California, Los Angeles. University of anything means public.
To both academic discipline and arrest, as well as increased police and private security presence. CSULA has done much the same, increasing the presence of both public and private law enforcement. While the schools justify these actions by claiming they're in the name of safety, the actual impact is the suppression of on-campus protest activity. As the school year comes to a close, many are left feeling that the activity this year has been strangled in its cradle. Ethiopian students could sympathize with such feelings. The suspensions and campus closures were not the full extent of the Ethiopian regime's repression. The regime also took great legislative efforts to make student protest as toothless as possible. First, using the Students' Union, NUEUS, as a peer-led site of control over the students.
This really mirrors American unions. Like, American unions of toothless. People have been talking about this. Books have been written about this. George Jackson said that the only place that a revolutionary has a union is trying to take over leadership and turn it into an actual revolutionary fighting organization. Yeah, that's what George Jackson said about unions. And if international affairs is your thing, there's a whole ass book called Blue Collar Empire by Jeff Shirky that talks about how the AFL-CIO has literally been an agent of the CIA and USAID and a whole bunch of other nasty acronyms. So, should you join your union at your workplace? Of course not. Of course you should. Of course you should. But should you view the union as a revolutionary vehicle at this time? No, it can be if you do the necessary mass work and you build a rank and file caucus. But like unions are basically at this point toothless lobbying organizations. They're that way by design. Like unions used to be dope. I keep telling people that white workers need to rediscover the spirit of the revolutionary miners at Blair Mountain. Like unions actually used to throw down in the fucking streets. They actually used to do heavy shit. But nowadays, they're more reliant on lawyers than they are on the rank and file and the power of the organized working class. That's shameful, and that has to change.
As well as the faculty. And second, creating new laws and regulations in the wake of the Shola Camp uprising to control.
Cigarette and jury, wasn't there like a massive fight in your parliament a couple months ago? Like people had fireworks and shit in the parliament and they were shooting them at each other?
When and where students could protest. This law was set to come into effect on April 11th, 1967. So naturally, the students set their protest against the anti-protest bill for April 10th, right before it would have went into effect. The law required students to have a permit to protest 7 days beforehand, to share the names and addresses of organizers with authorities, to have
What the fuck?
all signs and slogans approved, and to not have any dangerous articles present. A permit could be rejected on the
Dangerous written articles or shit like bombs.
basis of any of these violations, and violating this law could result in a $1,000 fine and a year in prison. For the students, this made public demonstration against Haile Selassie's regime basically impossible, and when they protested against it on April 10th, cops spent the day beating and tear gassing students into submission. There were over 120 arrests, and dozens of students reported injuries. At least 50 were hospitalized. Students responded to the violence by going on strike, refusing to go to class until their peers who remained in jail were freed. Jail support collectives were vital for both Ethiopian students and for Americans now, making sure that there is a core of people who focus on getting fellow protesters out of jail and helping them to fight charges.
I love how like violence in parliaments is something that's like normalized in other countries, like in Eastern Europe. Like if something like that happened in the United States, people would still be talking about it 2 months later. But the Serbian guy in chat is just like, oh yeah, it happens. Last month, nothing happened. Our opposition hit their own member. The leading party hit their own member who was also 8 months pregnant. There would be no events, no happenings, no situationalisms, no protests on said grass. All right, little Tito.
Is an incredibly important aspect of keeping a movement alive in the first place. If you're not part of a jail support collective, or if there's not one established in your area, working with comrades to establish one could be a big step. But these fraught situations were where the unique tactics of
One good thing about living in this currently very rainy St. Louis is that like there's a whole ass apparatus that evolved as a result of the Ferguson and Jason Stockley uprising in 2017 that like there's no reason if you're a protester for you to be sitting in jail because we have a long-lasting, experienced jail support network here. That's one of the benefits of living in a city that has gone through several rebellions in the past 10 years. Like, we have people that know our shit. We have a very, very thriving NLG legal observer community here. We have activist movement lawyers. We've got people who know how to care, who know how to do shit in the streets. Like, it's really, really good to have that type of community. Of course, it's scattered. A lot of these people aren't even in organizations. A lot of these people are anarchists. But still, it comes in handy. When shit goes south, when shit pops off, we're very, very good at getting together and getting our shit together and making our rage felt. You should build a culture like that in every feasible community in the United States and the world.
the Ethiopian students would shine. In 1964, the regime introduced the University Service Program. This was a mandatory public service program in which students had to participate in order to graduate. 72.1% of participants became high school teachers, which had the supreme benefit of allowing them to communicate their radicalism directly to their younger high school peers, providing the younger student radicals with direct inroads into the student movement on college campuses once they graduated. But
I think the Philippines had something similar, but this just confirms Mao's statement that reactionaries are fools that are constantly picking up rocks to to drop them on their own feet. So you know that these people are radicals, okay? You know that these people are radicals. You know that these people are anti-fascists. You know that these people hate your fascist-ass dictatorial imperial regime. You know that. But you know what you're going to do? You're going to make them go become high school teachers so that they can poison the minds of Ethiopia's youth and turn them into communists. Ooh. Like, why would you do that? What the fuck was Haile Selassie smoking?
But also helping them to organize where they already were. This both grew the student movement and meant that when college students were unable to protest due to school closures, suspensions, or mass imprisonment,
Serbian nothing burger enjoyers have been eating really good the last 4 months or so. You've been talking with your friend who is a student and is in an organization for student protest for his university. They are doing nothing. No organizing amongst the workers. Not that they don't want to. They genuinely can't, because none of these petty bourgeois motherfuckers have friends among the workers. That's a situation that's pretty common in the United States. Like, I was talking about this with some comrades the other day. Like, everybody wants to organize the working class, but there's no organic ties to the working class. There's no organic ties to the working class. So if you don't have organic ties to the working class, or you don't know people who actually come from the working class in your city, like a lot of these students at these high-dollar universities, SLU, WashU, etc., like most of the proletarian kids at St. Louis, they go to UMSL, University of Missouri at St. Louis, or they go to Fontbonne, Maryville, those types of universities. A lot of community colleges where they end up transferring. Like, working class kids in St. Louis generally do not go to WashU, or they generally do not go to SLU. I went to SLU, and I'm in a shitload of debt for it. Don't do like me. But yeah, they don't have any organic ties to the masses because they're not where the masses are. The best way to get organic ties to the masses is actually take a regular fucking job. Like, people mock baristas, but the Starbucks has a really, really thriving, really, really left-wing, really, really queer union movement going on right now. And if you want to organize the workers, that's where you should go. No, like, you don't have to go work at a fucking widget factory to thoroughly proletarianize yourself. You don't have to go burn yourself out by trying to work at McDonald's or Burger King. Like, that's not going to be very good for you. You're going to end up either dropping out of school, you're going to end up quitting your job, and then boom, all the supposed organizing that you were trying to do, it's gone kaput because you couldn't hack it. Like, you cannot work a stressful job like that and put yourself through college. Well, I'm not going to speak for anybody else, but man, I don't think I would not be able to do it. I would not be able to do it. As I know myself.
the high school
And I'm not going to touch that Kosovo is so Serbia shit with the 10-foot pole.
students could continue the struggle. It also made the student rebellion that much harder to handle and suppress. In Ethiopia, high school students played a vital role in the Ethiopian student movement and the revolution. They both produced theory, writing about their experiences and conditions.
I've actually seen a lot of organizing against ICE with that involves both black and brown youth. There was a walkout in Baltimore, I think, at the beginning of the year, when Trump announced that he was going to be coming down hard on undocumented people in the United States, and like, it was cool seeing black and brown unity, it's something that's very rare these days. Like, if you go on Twitter, you see reactionary nationalists of both ethnicities like squabbling with each other, calling each other horrible names. And honestly, I think that shit is astroturf. That shit is the feds. Like, no. The youth has always showed the way.
And participated in hardcore protests and direct actions. They did mutual aid, feeding the unhoused and poor even as they were themselves among them, seized and boycotted buses, demanding free bus fare for all, battled the police in the street, and made the revolution possible as they brought their ideas of liberation home to their families, who themselves protested and fought against the regime that beat their children night after night for demanding liberation and better conditions. In 2020, former LAPD Chief Michael Moore made the observation that LAPD had no issue controlling a massive protest of thousands of people, but it was easily overwhelmed, confused, and cowed by multiple smaller-scale protests happening in multiple locations in the same city.
That's the meaning of be water. Like, yeah, like these PSL type protests, no disrespect intended to PSL, but like when you've got like just a group of people that's going on a route that you've already handed over to the police in advance, it's going to be pretty easy for them to kettle, contain, split off different groups. But if you have an unannounced protest, a protest that's announced in the community by word of mouth or by flyers, Like, it's going to be very hard for them to contain. That's what's meant by be water. Like, can you grab a cup of water and hold it in your hand? No, it's going to be slipping through your fingers. It's going to be sliding all over the place. That's what we have to do. That's how revolts happen. And the masses kind of instinctively know this. Like, the masses are already masters of guerrilla warfare. Like, they're not going to let themselves be captured. We should learn from the masses.
Students in Ethiopia weaponized similar observations, forcing the regime to play whack-a-mole, as when one student uprising would be quelled, more would take their place. Student rebellion was impossible to crush, as dispersed students could simply join another crowd somewhere else, or would come back the next day angrier and with greater strategy and aggression, or both. The absolute solidarity between students was also invaluable. The breaking of that solidarity is part of what brought their movement down. In 2020, we chanted "No good cops in a racist system, no bad protesters in a revolution," as a way of reminding ourselves not to police each other's resistance and to stay in solidarity with each other. And
Do you hear that? Stop fucking getting on Twitter accusing other people of crimes. Stop getting on fucking Twitter accusing other people of crimes. Stop recording people in the acts of committing crimes. Stop asking people, "Oh, what have you done?" Like somebody's just going to give you a resume of all of the illegal ass activity that they've done. Like, liberals are always in HR mode. Even in the so-called movement, they're still in HR mode. Like, what have you done? Like, I'm going to give you a resume of all the shit that I've done since I've started calling myself a revolutionary. So that's why? So you can hand it over to the fucking FBI, which is supposed to be your enemy, but really isn't. Come the fuck on, man. Don't worry about what other people do. Worry about what you can do. Now, if somebody is objectively harming the movement, then yes, they should be criticized. That's why I'm not a big fan of liberals being allowed to dominate stuff, or liberals being allowed to dominate a united front or a coalition. But come on, man.
to never trust the police. In Ethiopia, student rebellions were at their weakest and most vulnerable when students allowed themselves to lose sight of their material goals and demands, and argued instead among each other, often over small semantic differences. This allowed the regime to exploit those political divides, fueled partly by the paranoia of traumatized students. This is why an insistence on respecting diversity of tactics and radical ideas within reason is not only necessary but required. There are better things we can be doing than fighting each other. Another important piece of the student movement's success was the support and aid of the faculty. During a police attack on a permitted protest at Arat Kilo campus, faculty found themselves also falling to police batons and violence. The faculty's pressure against the government, especially via the EUTA, the Ethiopian Teachers Union, was an invaluable voice against the regime's suppression of student rights.
So I'm going to pause this for a little bit because Black Agenda Report shared this really interesting article from a guy. His name was Martin Sostre. He was a Afro-Puerto Rican anarchist. He was born on March 20th, 1923, and he opened the legendary Afro-Asian bookshop after being in the army for a short period of time and being a hustler for a little bit. So he was arrested along with his co-worker Geraldine Robertson by COINTELPRO-aligned cops for fabricated drug charges. Basically the same thing that they did to Billie Holiday. So he died on August 12, 2015 at the age of 92 after a long period in the revolutionary movement. So this is an article that is titled "Armed Struggle, Natural Response to Fascism." So he says, the question now is, what are we going to do about this murderous fascism? Shall we continue spouting revolutionary rhetoric without commensurate deeds? And passively stand by like sheep while our comrades are framed by the Gestapo police and kidnapped off the streets and murdered one by one? Must we passively wait our turn to be led to the oppressive cages, brutalized or murdered? Or shall we oppose the choking fascist oppression, which, if allowed to continue encroaching on what is left of our personal freedoms, will eventually convert us into dehumanized, mindless robots, aka the average American in 2025? If you don't think the average American in 2025 is a dehumanized, mindless robot, you're not paying attention. The answer is obvious. Indeed, to defend ourselves by all means necessary against the destruction of our human rights and personhood, not only is a natural right to self-defense, but a human duty. By what means, then, shall we resist the fascist oppressors? The answer to this is determined by the means employed to oppress us. Our oppression is multidimensional. We are oppressed economically, legally, psychologically, culturally, physically, and by all other means deemed necessary by the criminal ruling class to maintain themselves in power. Since oppression is multidimensional, does not common sense dictate that resistance to it be multidimensional, with each level of oppression challenged by a commensurate level of revolutionary resistance? For example, the fascist lies propagated by the controlled media press must be challenged with revolutionary truth disseminated by the movement press, tapes, films, books, pamphlets, leaflets, posters, etc. Not too many revolutionaries and militants will disagree with this. Only when the same common sense is applied to opposing fascist violence with revolutionary armed violence do many of them become horrified. So he goes on to talk about the Symbionese Liberation Army. Being charitable to Comrade Suster here, I don't think he knew like the depth to which the Symbionese Liberation Army was absolutely fucked up. And he goes on to talk about, like, he literally extends love and solidarity to these people. So if you don't know who the Symbionese Liberation Army is, those are the people who kidnapped Patty Hearst. And people said they brainwashed her, did something else to her, but they eventually started robbing banks with Patty Hearst in tow. And yeah, most of these people ended up being burned to death after stupidly walling themselves up in a building in South Central Los Angeles, and the cops set the building on fire, burned down half the neighborhood, and they found many of these erstwhile cadres burnt to crisps in a crawl space up under the house. But that's why you do not try to establish for yourself a fortress that the police could easily surround and massacre you in. But yeah, they were led by a guy named Donald DeFreeze, also known as Cinque Mtume. And he was, if I recall correctly, in Vacaville, where he was subjected to MK Ultra experimentation, given drugs, all types of other stuff. So I personally believe that the Symbionese Liberation Army was an MK Ultra experiment gone rogue. But a lot of people did not know this at the time. The Black Panthers actually hated these people because they campaigned to get the first black superintendent of Oakland, Marcus Foster, murdered. Like, they literally shot this dude with cyanide bullets. That's how intense but also nuts they were. Like, they literally just filled bullets with cyanide and murked this dude. And the Black Panther Party was like, what the fuck is wrong with you people? Like, we campaigned to get the first black school superintendent elected, and they murdered him because they thought that his plan to implement school IDs was fascist. So, yeah. So he goes on to talk about how, paradoxically, though these leftists bitterly denounce all violence by U.S. revolutionaries against the U.S. ruling class, I don't consider the SLA revolutionaries. They highly praise as heroic the armed violence of the revolutionaries in Asia, Africa, Ireland, the Middle East, and Latin America. The rule seems to be that armed violence is an acceptable form of revolutionary struggle, except when employed by U.S. revolutionaries against the fascist ruling class of the U.S. In effect, it's as if the role of these left groups is to protect the ruling class from violence and confine the liberation struggle to the boundaries of legal activities approved by the ruling class. He's right here. Like, I keep seeing a lot of people, they talk about, oh yeah, long live the revolutionary struggle of Palestine. Yet, whenever somebody breaks a fucking window, they're like, oh my God, you're going to get us all arrested. Newsflash, revolution is against the law. If you engage in or propagate revolution, you're probably going to end up in jail at some point or another. However, the irrefutable truth is that a liberation struggle is revolutionary war. Revolutionary war is a complicated process of mass struggle, armed and unarmed, peaceful and violent, legal and clandestine, economic and political, where all forms of struggle are developed harmoniously around the action of armed struggle. This is why I think that Maoists and anarchists are natural friends. That this is something that a Maoist could have written. Anyone who by now has not grasped these basic facts does not know what liberation struggle is, or is trying to palm off reformism for liberation struggle. A distinction must be made between reformists and revolutionaries. Reformists seek merely to reform through legal means and not overthrow the existing fascist system. The overwhelming majority of so-called leftists in the United States are reformists. Okay, they do not support overthrow. They think that this country can be modified. They think that this country can be reformed to serve the overwhelming majority of the people. That's not going to happen. If you know anything about American history, if you know anything about the Constitution, if you know anything about how this country is set up, that's never going to happen. That's why they panic when the people exercise their right to armed self-defense against the genocidal violence of the fascist ruling class. Revolutionaries seek the complete overthrow of the fascist system by all means necessary, including armed struggle. They call it broaderism. Well, a nice little dig at the CPUSA. Brother comrade Musa Bey actually wrote an article about the CPUSA. I shared it, and a handful of CPUSA people didn't like that very much, but who gives a fuck? The CPUSA has been trashed since my grandma was a kid. So, to repeat, revolutionaries seek the complete overthrow of the fascist system by all means necessary, including armed struggle. A lot of people, they willfully misinterpret so-called ultra-leftists like myself. They think that the only way that we want to organize is with arms in hand. That is not the case. Like, many of us do canvassing. Many of us engage in grassroots level mutual aid efforts. Many of us engage in a variety of stuff that reformists also like, but we do it with revolutionary strategy in mind. If all you do for the revolution is canvass, you're not a revolutionary, you're a reformist. Because if the majority of your work is electoral, then you probably think that somehow revolution can come through the ballot box. You have the right to think like that. Like I keep saying, part of being an adult, part of being a revolutionary, so to speak, is the right to be fucking wrong, the right to be a fucking idiot. If you think that elections are going to somehow deliver benefits to the majority of people, then you're a fucking idiot. I'm sorry. You may be a revolutionary idiot, but you're still an idiot. And I understand, like, there's many things that you've read that have led to you thinking that way, but you're thinking wrong. Why are you thinking wrong? Because if you study people like Martin Sostre, if you study people like Huey P. Newton, if you study people like Fred Hampton, if you study people like George Jackson, if you study people who have actually been through this shit, if you study people who actually engage in the practice of making revolution, this study will tell you that that's not going to fucking happen. He also considers the SLA the people's armed force that has emerged within the United States. That's not the case. Like the SLA really did not do all that much damage to American imperialist capital. Weather Underground did more damage to American imperialist capital, and I'm really not a Weather Underground fan. The denunciation of the SLA by the movement press is indistinguishable from that of the ruling class. No. If there's people that are running around calling themselves revolutionaries doing stupid shit that makes the movement look bad, and by makes the movement look bad, I mean like literally brings down repression on innocent people or makes us look like a bunch of lunatics, like why the fuck would you shoot Marcus Foster? The Black Panther Party literally campaigned to get this guy elected, and you go out and kill him. You shoot him in the back with cyanide bullets. Like, what purpose does that serve? How does that serve black people? How does that help black people? Of course, if you're an MK Ultra experiment going rogue, you really don't give a shit about helping black people. Denunciations and critiques should be made in a spirit of constructive criticism. I literally have a book on it by Vicky Legion, who is my homegirl. She's from St. Louis. But sometimes constructive criticism isn't enough, especially when the people that you're criticizing do not take criticism. The SLA really didn't take criticism. They were too caught up on doing their own MK Ultra bag. So yes, we should discuss armed struggle. We should support armed struggle. But ultimately, the SLA wasn't really hitting on shit. Let's just read this shit that they wrote. This was their declaration. Declare war, the Symbionese Federation. These people could not write. And the Symbionese Liberation Army. The Symbionese Federation and the Symbionese Liberation Army is a united and federated grouping of members of different races and people in socialist political parties of the fascist. What political parties were these people in? These were a bunch of fucking hippies and weirdos, led by a fucking MK Ultra experiment of the fascist United States of America, who have, under black and minority leadership, formed and joined the Symbionese Federated Republic. Why do people keep establishing countries with no basis? What the fuck is a Symbionese Federated Republic? They've agreed to struggle together in behalf of all their people and races and political parties' interests in the gaining of freedom and self-determination and independence for all their people and races. This is some Jim Jones type shit. The Symbionese Federation is not a government, so if you're not a government, then why are you calling yourself a republic? But rather it is a united and federated formation of members of different races and people and political parties who have agreed to call the struggle. You already said that. The struggle in a united front for the independence and self-determination of each of their races and people and the liquidation of the common enemy. The Symbionese Liberation is not a party, but rather is a federation. You already said that. How much acid did these people take? How much acid did these people take? Live symbiotically. Remember the LA massacre? My God. The absolute state of these people. This is what happens when you take acid. Acid is a drug. Acid is literally a CIA drug. Just say no to LSD.
Radicalism. They both participated in protests with the students at times, but also demanded the release of their students from jail when arrested, and brought to light the destruction of their campuses and teaching materials by the police. In the modern day, there's a severe marked difference between the success of student occupations that do and do not have faculty support. This relationship is symbiotic. Students support striking teachers, and teachers support protesting students. This kind of solidarity.
So, if this was Ethiopia, like all of those faculty at Columbia would have walked out in solidarity with their students. Everybody in that student union would have walked out in solidarity with their students. Like, what purpose is a union if your members can literally be grabbed and you do nothing, or you do shit that doesn't work? Like, what are you gonna do? Write a strongly worded letter? Hey, release our friend. Like, come on. They're already showing you. They're already giving away the game. They do not give a fuck about your march. They do not give a fuck about your strongly worded letter. These people do not give a fuck about anything. They do not care. Yet you continue to care. You continue give them a cold Pepsi. Jesus, that's a blast from the past. Like, these people do not care. They don't give a fuck. They don't care about the law. They don't care about what's legal. They know what they're doing is illegal. But what they're doing, it's a system test. They're trying to lay out as much pressure as they can on you, on our movement, to see how much they can, get away with. Of course, a lot of this shit is being fought in court. Mahmoud Khalil's case is being fought in court. Most of this shit is illegal. But, yeah, they don't care about the courts. Okay? They don't care. Trump was literally elected because of his yapping about the economy. What does he do? Implement tariffs, which are going to fucking gut the economy. They're going to hurt average, ordinary, everyday workers, white workers included, who stupidly went and voted for this man in droves twice because I'm starting to think that the white working class they believe that as long as it hurts black people, as long as it hurts Latinos, then they will flagellate themselves. They will accept pain as well. But some of them are starting to get wise from what I've seen from these town halls, especially veterans and older people that are dependent on Social Security. Like, if you want to see some shit, let Trump and Musk touch Social Security. You're going to see some shit. Like, everybody has known that you do not touch Social Security. You do not touch Medicare. You do not touch these entitlements that benefit the white middle class. Because when you do that, you are going to lose elections. That dude that Elon Musk was trying to gas up, like, you had Musk literally up there in Wisconsin handing out $1 million checks, which, if I recall correctly, is bribery. But anyways, the guy lost by 10 points. Why? Because people are sick of fucking Elon Musk. That's why Trump is dumping him.
Is what made 75,000 person strong protests able to march through Addis Ababa to topple the regime. 9 schools had to close, as students had both refused to come to class and continued to disrupt ongoing classes. A police report of the time alleges that 2,775 people were detained. 377 were charged with crimes and 60 people were charged for supporting the student movement. And
the funny thing about Obama is that, like, people, like white people, were like, "Oh my God, he's such a dictator. He's doing evil things. He's killing innocent white children." Like, Trump was just, Obama was still a shitty president, but by and large, he was just a regular ass neoliberal. Trump is actually doing dictatorial shit, and these lemmings are just swallowing it. Like, Trump is literally dragging people off the streets and throwing them into a Salvadoran mega prison where they can be tortured and brutalized. But they don't care. These people don't care. But Obama, he signs an executive. Oh my God, horrible, bad dictator. Why? Because he's black. We knew at the time it was because he was black. We know now it's because he was black. That's why.
Students died. The movement.
Well, no, Trump is not going to, like, fully break ties with Elon Musk because, like you said, Trey, yeah, it's his bankroll. But in terms of, like, kayfabe, yeah, Musk is going to be taking a side role. Why? Because people are fucking sick of him. You literally got people going around like, every Tesla is a target now, as it should be. And people are like, oh, they're just cars. They're just electric cars. No. if a fascist owns Krispy Kreme donuts and this guy makes a statement saying that such or such ethnic group belongs in camps, people are going to start fucking up Krispy Kreme restaurants. People are going to stop eating Krispy Kreme donuts. People are going to start firebombing it. Why? Because fascism is not okay. People do not like fascism. People do not want to live under fascism, even though they keep stupidly voting for it. But yeah, you cannot plead political innocence when you fancy yourself a political operator, man. That's what's wrong with Musk. He wants his cake, but he also wants to eat it too. You cannot pose as an objective political actor while saying the shit that you say and doing the shit that you do.
The movement was not without its martyrs. As things escalated, a number of students fell to the regime's violence. Shifra Kibide was one of the first. The high school student was killed during...
This video is from a friend of mine, A Nazi's Library, who you should subscribe to on YouTube. Well, Florida is the capital of American fascism. You have to go, you have to have a nuke to hit that motherfucker. But this is what the student resistance needs to learn from Ethiopians. Highly recommend.
Protest demanding the waiving of school fees, improvement of...
I really like A Nazi because they go and they find these obscure topics. Very, very few people in the United States know about the Ethiopian student resistance. So he finds these obscure topics and they've got a niche for themselves. I've learned so much from his channel. You should subscribe and learn from them as well.
Conditions, and an end to the arbitrary suspensions of students. When police suppressed the protest...
Even if Trump doesn't run for a third term, he can't run for a third term. He knows that. But even if Trump doesn't run for a third term, his impact on American politics, he's broken the fucking mold. This is Reagan too. We've lived in a consistent Reagan regime since 1978. Now we're going to start talking about how we've lived in a consistent Trump regime since 2015 or so. He's broken the mold. He's changed so much shit that this country is really never going to be the same. Everybody's going to be compared to Trump. Everybody's going to be operating under Trump rules. The dude has changed the rules. He's basically Reagan part 2. So even if he doesn't win a third term, the judges that he's appointed, the Supreme Court, he's fucking ruined the Supreme Court for the next 25, 30 years. So, even if he doesn't get a third term, his impact is pretty secure. He's basically captured the Republican Party.
Violently, another martyr, Demike Zwedi, was killed after falling from a police van as students attempted to stop a police transport that had been kidnapping students off the street to take to police training centers to be detained. Yet another, Tekile Wilde Hawariat, died fighting cops that November. The most famous of the students killed was the prominent student organizer Tilahun Jazaa. Tilahun was among the first of few male students to advocate for and aid feminist students in gaining prominence in the movement and organizing, and his death was believed to be an assassination by the state due to his influence. On Sunday, December 28, 1969, while out on a date with his girlfriend at a Fincho bar in Addis Ababa, 2 men approached Tilahun Jazaa and shot him 3 times. The shooter was later identified as a police officer, Berhanu Meka. Tilahun himself was taken to Haile Selassie Hospital, where he died of his wounds before he could be operated on.
So, this guy, Haile Selassie, he was doing all of this shit to his own people, but a lot of less educated right-wing Pan-Africans, they saw this guy as a type of god. They saw him as the Lion of Judah. That was one of his many, many titles that came to him as an emperor of the Solomonic dynasty. But, yeah, this guy was a fucking dictator. A brutal fucking imperialist emperor. That's what he was. Ask any Somalian or Eritrean what they think of him. Let's go back to these morons.
For my small state. So
My small state.
I'm hearing from people, as I read letters from people who work in the Social Security.
So why is he wearing all black? Is this supposed to be America's funeral? We're not going to stop climate change. We can adapt to it, but that ship has already sailed. Anybody that tells you that they know how to stop climate change is lying to you. Okay, the ship has already sailed. Even if we make a revolution tomorrow, even if we establish worldwide communism tomorrow, we're still going to have to deal with climate change. It's something that's dealt with. It's not something that's stopped.
Agency and what the chaos that's been created and the lack of the deteriorating service to seniors. I've heard from seniors who are terrified about what's being done to Social Security and how it might affect their lives. I'm hearing demands from our constituents, people demanding, Senator.
So this guy yaps for 12 hours straight. Let's see if he says anything of substance.
In foreign relations, and this stuff is insanity.
He's got 12 hours worth of shit typed up there. He's got a whole binder full of shit.
Here's NBC.
I should be a U.S. senator since you guys like bald black dudes that wear glasses that talk a lot.
News. President Donald Trump has said Ukraine, not Russia, started the war. He called Ukraine.
They did by trying to join fucking NATO.
President Vladimir Zelensky, not Vladimir Putin. He called Zelensky a dictator.
He is. Dictators don't let you have elections.
Meanwhile, Trump's administration is standing down on a suite of tough anti-Kremlin policies.
Okay, good. World War III would kind of suck.
In just over a month, Trump has executed a startling realignment of American foreign policy, effectively throwing U.S. support behind Moscow and rejecting the tight alliance with Kyiv, cultivated by former President.
We're only 11 minutes in, and I'm already tired of this dude.
Joe Biden. The extraordinary pivot has upended decades of hawkish foreign policy towards Russia that provided a rare area of bipartisan consensus in an
hawkish. Why do you want hawkish policies towards Russia? Like, this is why I keep saying the Democrats of 2025 are basically the Republicans of 1972. These are nothing but Rockefeller Republicans.
Increasingly divided nation. Trump's recent moves have drawn international attention.
Yeah, this guy's gearing up for 28 run. I can already see it. Like, he's trying to sound and seem presidential. But it's just all yip yap. It's just jibber jabber bullshit. Like, you're not saying anything of substance. You're not putting out any substantive policy goals. You're actually trying to get us to do the same shit that Reagan era Republicans are doing. That's what you want. Never mind, you look into this guy's history and it's all just fucking corporate donation, corporate slavery bullshit. Like, this guy's an empty suit, a puppet for real estate and big pharmaceutical lobbyists.
Unsettling U.S. alliances and thrilling conservative populists who favor a turn away from Zelensky. The new posture was put in stark relief on Friday during a tense Oval Office meeting. We all remember this. Between Trump and Zelensky, the leaders clashed in front of the press, raising questions about the future of American support for Kyiv. Alliances and partners around the world are our biggest strength against any.
This guy's going to be hoarse as fuck. He ain't got no water up there. Oh, yes, he does. He's got 2 little water glasses down here.
U.S. adversary.
He wasn't even filibustering anything. Like, when you filibuster something like Strom Thurmond, the previous longest filibuster, he was filibustering the Civil Rights Act. Yeah, he was a racist piece of shit. He also had a half-black daughter. But he was a racist piece of shit. But, like, that's a filibuster. It's when you try to stop a bill. It's basically, I believe motherfuckers have stood up here and read the phone book. People have stood up here and read out the dictionary. People have stood up here and read out the thesaurus. People have stood up here and read newspaper after newspaper. This dude is just sitting here just fucking grumbling and mumbling. It's theatrical grandstanding to achieve nothing. He broke a famous record for nothing at all. Nothing at all. He's just like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to filibuster. I'm going to break Strom Thurmond's record.
Competitor from China to Russia to Iran to North Korea. We are the strongest nation on the planet Earth, but our strength is multiplied and magnified when we stand in alliance with those nations that share our values and are bonded to us and are committed to us. In fact, the only time Article 5 in the United Nations, that article that says that if one person in NATO is attacked.
Yeah, he's not filibustering anything. He just did this. It's a protest. He calls himself protesting Trump policies. But no, this was not against any bill. This was not against nothing. And then after this guy sat down, it's back to business as usual. They're going to go back to just ramming Trump's bullshit through, ramming the tariffs through, doing all this. Like, yeah, it's just yapping. This is the equivalent of Nancy Pelosi and top congressional Democrats kneeling while wearing kente cloth. That's what this is.
Everyone is attacked, and they all join together. That one time it happened was 9/11, when our NATO allies stood up with America. And so look at NATO. It's been the bedrock of the international order for 80 years. It was created in 1949
It was created by Nazis.
by 12
No, look it up. NATO was literally created by Nazis. They literally took all of the top Wehrmacht people and integrated them into this. West Germany was literally run by former Nazis. Not just Wehrmacht people, even though the clean Wehrmacht myth is bullshit, but like literal fucking SS motherfuckers were allowed to help run East Germany.
countries, including the United States, to provide collective security, and in many ways to provide collective security against the Soviet Union. Since then, 20 more countries have joined NATO through 10 rounds of enlargement, bringing the total number of NATO countries to 32. The most recent additions were Sweden in 2024 and Finland in 2023, who applied to join NATO in 2022 after Russia invaded Ukraine, because those countries are realizing that the authoritarian dictator that Putin is, who threatens his smaller neighbors, those other nations have realized they should be standing with NATO.
Look, I'm not a fan of Vladimir Putin. He's a capitalist oligarch. Russia is run by capitalist oligarchs. Russia is not a socialist country. It's up to Russian communists to deal with their own ruling class. But you do not have to stop glazing the fucking dude. Like, I don't trust anybody. I don't trust any American politician. Well, I don't trust any American politician, period. But I don't trust any American politician that speaks more about the affairs of foreign countries than what's actually going on in their district. Like, bro, you represent New Jersey. You represent New Jersey. Is New Jersey doing very well right? Let's talk about Newark. Talk about your constituent who was literally dragged off to an ICE concentration camp in Louisiana. Talk about him. Have you mentioned Mahmoud Khalil's name? That should have been the first thing that you mentioned. Same reason I don't like fucking Fetterman. Well, there's a lot of reasons to not like fucking Fetterman. But like everything he talks about, Israel. Like, bro, are you the senator for Tel Aviv or are you the senator for Philly? Are you the senator for Pittsburgh? Are you the senator for Allentown? Are you the senator for Scranton? Go to Kensington. Look at how Trank Dope has ruined your community. But no, it's all Israel. Like, bro, what? Why are you glazing foreign fucking countries?
That we have a principle of collective defense, as I said, enshrined in Article 5 of the North Atlantic Treaty. Collective.
Let's fast forward to a half hour. This motherfucker's still talking about foreign shit.
Is Canada.
Denmark.
Oh, it's Denmark.
Denmark lost per capita, I believe. Excuse me. Let me say.
So is this the conversation of bald motherfuckers? I want to be in the conversation. I'm a bald motherfucker too.
Simply ask of my colleague one more
question. Thank you very much. I yield for a question while retaining the floor.
Is my colleague aware that broadly distributed across our NATO allies is service and sacrifice, including the loss of their troops in combat, and that every single loss in combat was a loss of great service and sacrifice by our NATO allies?
What the fuck does that mean?
Yes, I am familiar, and I'm grateful for you making those points as we threaten Greenland and Denmark and try to bully them in a way.
He's already tired.
That, with a rhetoric that fashions more after the behavior of Vladimir Putin.
Weak, half hour in, you're not even tired.
Putin's
I don't even think Strom Thurmond would have stopped for a water break.
Threatening before the Ukrainian invasion, as opposed to what allies do, who are grateful for shared sacrifice, who are grateful for shared honor, who are grateful for shared prosperity. What is happening right now to me is shameful. How we're treating our allies is unacceptable. And the tariffs that will be imposed will indeed hurt Canada and other NATO allies. But they will hurt us in the long run more.
This is why I really accept the JD Pond Don characterization. Like, this guy is a third worldist wet dream. Like, he's literally just stuffed dynamite under, still domestically repressive, but he stuffed dynamite under every fucking liberal / neocon foreign policy love child, and has just struck a match to it. That's what he's done. Like, this guy is credibly going to blow up NATO, either this year or the next. Yeah. He's just upsetting the new world order that was established post World War II. Like, he doesn't give two fucks. I mean, that's why he's a third world wet dream.
Not only
It's the job of revolutionaries to be able to move and maneuver in this new terrain that our enemies are stupidly handing us.
the immediacy of the driving up of prices for Americans, what the president is doing as he turns his back on Republican traditions and American and Democratic traditions, it's going to hurt us more as a nation in the long run, as other countries
Good, America needs to be hurt.
look to other places for leadership of the free world.
Will
We are not the free world. If you're in the free world, you don't have people being dragged off the street for words. Stop saying that. We are not the free world. America has never been the free world. My hairline buddy. America has never been the free world. People that look like me and you used to be swung from fucking trees for not giving up the sidewalk to white people.
my colleague yield for another question?
I yield for a question while retaining the floor.
So he's just standing up in this room, this very gorgeously appointed room, talking to himself. Well, no, not just talking to himself, talking to the turkey.
Is my
Mr. Booker, I yield the
colleague familiar with the testimony of General Jim Mattis, a decorated 4-star Marine Corps general who served as Secretary of
Well, see, my filibuster will result in me getting arrested.
Defense in the previous Trump administration, who testified about what the consequences would be if
I need a cigarette. You two watch these turkeys and let me know in chat if there's something interesting.
we were to defund development and diplomacy.
I hope that the colleague of mine, who again has been a mentor, a friend on all things foreign policy, my belief is that he's referring to when General Mattis sat before the United States Senate and said very pointedly, if you cut the foreign aid, if you cut organizations like USAID, if you cut the programs of the State Department, then buy me more bullets.
Will my colleague yield for a final question?
I yield for a question while retaining the floor.
Does my colleague have an opinion about whether it strengthens or harms America in our national security to have an earned reputation as a nation of compassion, a nation that comes to the aid of those suffering through humanitarian disasters, a nation of compassion that provides health care and access for retirement in decency, a nation that cares for the least of these on the margins of the world and that has a just and inclusive society at home? Does my colleague have an opinion about whether it strengthens or weakens our nation at home and abroad to earn a reputation for compassion and reliability, or instead to deserve a reputation for unreliability and cruelty?
So this is the powerful thing about my friend, who I went with on my first trip to the continent of Africa as a senator. And I remember flying in to Zimbabwe. The leader of that country had passed away. And you always correct me on my pronunciation, so I'm going to try my best. Mnangagwa.
Mnangagwa, yes.
Mnangagwa, thank you, sir. The alligator, it was his reputation, had taken over as his leadership. And we, this bipartisan merry group of senators, were going there to sit in a unified, bipartisan way and say to this new leader, you need to honor democratic principles, you need to honor free and fair elections, that we want to be your partner, we want to be your friend, but it's time for a new, peaceful, democratic Zimbabwe. And as we landed, I don't know if you remember, he was landing too in the airport, and he was coming from China. He was coming from China, who has different values than we have. In fact, you and I both see now all over the continent of Africa a competition. We come with USAID, we come with PEPFAR. We come with a program called AGOA, helping with economic development. We come with scientists that stand in the breach against the worst infectious diseases. One of the most courageous things I saw Chris Coons do in my life was when the Ebola scare was happening about 8 years ago, and was starting to show up on our shores. You did something that people were afraid to do. You went to Africa to visit with the people from our country that are there fighting Ebola. You had to come in quarantine when you came back to make sure you didn't have it. It was amazing because you were going there to say to the world, I, Chris Coons, Senator for Delaware, here, but America is here. America knows that an infectious disease anywhere is a threat to public health everywhere. America knows that when it comes to the globe, Martin Luther King was right in his spiritual proclamation in the letters from the Birmingham jail that we are all caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a common garment of destiny, that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. I have been to where you've been, from Kenya and Tanzania, to traveling with you to Ouagadougou. You used to make me smile when I used to say the capital of Burkina Faso. Ouagadougou, my friend. There's a word I learned from a language, the Bantu language. It basically roughly translates into this: I am because we are. I am because we are. America has learned.
This guy needs to take a break to go shine his head. Like, us bald people have to. That's literally who he thinks he is. He thinks he's Martin. He thinks he's light-skinned Martin Luther King. That's who he thinks he is. But he's not. The difference between Cory Booker and Martin Luther King is that Martin Luther King actually had a movement behind him. Like, when Martin Luther King spoke, he was representing a movement that was seeking to get democratic and civil rights for black people, rights that we did not have. This guy, what is, like, who is he speaking on behalf of? He's certainly not speaking on behalf of the people of New Jersey, because if he was speaking on behalf of the people of New Jersey, he would be talking about Mahmoud Khalil. He would be talking about the atrocious conditions that the people of Newark are forced to suffer under. He doesn't represent the people of New Jersey. He represents corporations and he represents Israel. That's all. That's who he represents. This guy's an empty fucking suit trying to gear up for a 2028 presidential run that he's going to lose.
The power of soft power. General Mattis knew much cheaper.
And we're still talking about Mad Dog.
Cheaper investment, much more success. String of successes that we've had in the last 25 years have been with our soft power, not with our 20-year wars in places like Iraq and Afghanistan. General Mattis.
So you talk about 20-year wars, but you talk about soft power, that the goal of soft power, okay, it's not to help people. When USAID stamps those little food packages, like, consider why people are hungry in the first place. People are hungry in the first place because the United States steals their resources and drives their people into famine. Okay? The United States does not feed people. The United States makes people suffer. Then it comes in with missionaries, with food aid, with advisors that always want to represent and force countries to adopt the Washington Consensus. That's what America is about. America does not help people. America does not do shit for free. If America is sending food to a country halfway around the world, believe me, it gets paid for that shit some way or another. America will make you hungry. America will make you starve. America will make you sick, and then send doctors that you're forced to pay for with your gold reserves, with your oil, with your lithium, with your cobalt. That's what America is about.
Mattis knew that. He gave wisdom. He said, do not cut the State Department. Do not cut USAID. They're making
cut everything.
Valuable contract.
Cut USA, cut the State Department. Like, neither one of these institutions. Like, people are actually out here. Don't fire. Like, why should I care if a bunch of FBI and CIA agents get fired? These motherfuckers killed Malcolm. These motherfuckers killed Fred. These motherfuckers killed MLK, the guy that this bald motherfucker is trafficking in. The FBI, the CIA, they have never done anything good for the world. They have never done anything good. The State Department, they have never done anything good for the struggling, toiling people of the world. America is a lie. America is a myth. America is a corporation in a trench suit, in a trench coat with an army. That's what America is. Quit fooling yourself. This guy is paid to fool you. But a lot of people who do not get paid to lie, they believe this shit. Like they believe that America is a shining city on a hill. America is a shining turd in a latrine. America is a shining turd in a toilet, in a gas station bathroom. That's what America is.
Contribution to fighting terrorism, to fighting instability, to spreading democracy, to fighting infectious diseases, where we go and stand, but now we're shrinking, we're retreating, we're pulling back, we're cutting aid. And when crises are happening like we're seeing in Myanmar right now, we don't even have the personnel to be there to help people. But you know who does? China. And they show up and they leverage
What are you so afraid of?
influence. You and I know
This reminds me of something that the Afghans said in regards to America's an amalgamation of the East Indian Company of the British Empire. Yeah, pretty much. Like our flag is literally based on the East India Company's flag. The Stars and Stripes, yeah, that's what it's based on. The only change is that the stars would be replaced by the old UK naval jack. But it reminds me of something that the Afghans said about the difference between the Soviets and the Americans. The Soviets, they built hospitals. The Americans blew up hospitals. That's the difference.
this in the continent of Africa. They're here, take our money, be in debt to us now, and we have control. By the way, we want a military port here.
That's exactly what America does.
Like they have right next to
And they say this while trying to get rid of Cuban doctors from going and helping people. Like literally, Marco Rubio was in Jamaica mauling about, the Cubans, they're not there to help. Yes, okay. Cuba is a fucking poor country. It's poor because of the United States. Cuba is a fucking poor-ass country that sends doctors all around the world. Why? To help people. America does not do that. If America sends doctors to your country, it's because they made you sick. But people believe this shit. People really, really believe this shit.
to us in Djibouti. The Chinese are playing a long game, and Trump is playing into their hands and weakening our nation, not just against infectious diseases, not just against the global fight against climate change, not just against the economic opportunities that we're missing out on in the continent of Africa. And guess what? If you don't
So you finally get to the nitty gritty. You're molding. You're up here. Well, you can't mold because you're already bald. You're up here going off because you're afraid that America is losing ground in the imperialist rat race. And you know what? You're right. But the difference between Cory Booker, who is not a communist, and me, who is a communist, realizes that, like, America has to go. There's no good that this country has produced. This country is ass. The whole world agrees that this country is ass. Okay? Like I said, it's a shining turd in a gas station bathroom toilet. There's nothing redeemable about this country. Absolutely nothing whatsoever. So I want America to fall. Let it fall. Let it collapse. Under the weight of its own incompetence and stupidity.
You don't know this? By 2050, 1 out of every 4 people on the planet Earth will live on the continent of Africa. 1 of every 3 working-age people on the planet Earth will be on the continent of Africa. China's playing the long game. Not only critical rare earth minerals, but the economic power of the most populous continent on the planet.
And they're saying it out loud more and more. What's up, Conrad Maurice? I haven't seen you in a while. Yeah, they say this shit more and more. As these Democrats get desperate. And the thing is, all the Democrats have to do is orient themselves towards the left. Okay, no, AOC is not a leftist. But they keep using these people to sheepdog people back into this useless-ass, Republican-ass party. They keep doing this, and then they fuck the left over. Like, there was a meeting a few months ago at Lawton, Virginia, where these high-level Democratic staffers, they literally were like, you know what? We don't need the Palestinians. We don't need the social Democrats. We don't need any of these people. That's why I laugh whenever people say, no, DSA is a wing of the Democrats. No, the Democrats hate DSA. They hate that we use their ballot line. They hate that we're getting people elected under their banner because they don't want anything to do with socialism. The Democrats hate DSA. Hate DSA. That's why I'm consistently of the view that we need to quit fucking with these people. That's been a line struggle in DSA since before I joined. But I think more and more people are starting to realize that, yeah, there's really no, like, do we want to really be part of the party of Cory Booker? Of course not.
Planet. And what are we doing with Trump? We're doing Michael Jackson. We're moonwalking away from that continent, saying, China, go ahead.
This dude is so fucking lame.
I love you, Chris Coons.
That's actually the dude's last name. That's actually your why didn't your ancestors change your name? Your last name is a racial slur. Bruh.
I am the ranking member of this subcommittee inspired by you, Chris Coons. And the work that you and me and Lindsey Graham and John McCain did over the...
So you're giving shout out to John McCain. You're giving a shout out to Lindsey Graham. Why are you shouting out members of the opposing party? I thought these people were supposed to be your enemies. You fucking cuck.
For the last 10 years is being swept away as our allies are saying frightening things that they have to look elsewhere for leadership and not to the people that saved the free world. It is a shame that we're doing to my grandparents' generation. With my grandmother with her war bonds and her victory garden, and my grandfather building bombers at the Willow Run bomber plant in Michigan. All the country came together and sacrificed for the war effort.
During the war effort, workers in Flint and Detroit were engaging in hate strikes because their black fellow workers were entering the factories. During the war, like there was a race riot in Detroit, the Arsenal of Democracy in 1943. Yeah. Yeah. And the fascists, they made so much propaganda with this. Like you literally had Japanese and Nazi propaganda talking about how black people, like, do you have any idea how fucked up you have to be for the Nazis to be talking about how fucked up you treat people in your own country? There were race riots in this country. There were black soldiers that were lynched in uniform. There was one guy, Isaiah Woodward, he was pulled off a bus in his uniform and beaten until he was blind by some fucking redneck sheriff in South Carolina. But yeah, here you are with your fucking Uncle Tom ass. Oh my man, we were there too, mouse.
We saved Europe. We bled and died on that European continent. There are, and you've seen them, these fields of crosses, and you see some Stars of David, and you see some Muslim graves. You see it all. Our American boys died. And yet we still invested in that continent. We still invested with the Marshall Plan. We still invested with the Berlin Airlift. We still stood up to communism. And a great Republican
piece of shit
president, a great Republican.
So you can stand up to communism, which objectively is no longer a threat. It needs to be. You can stand up to communism, but you can't stand up to Lindsey Graham and John McCain's corpse. And you can't stand up to Zionist Israel, but you can stand up to the Soviet Union, which had just been dead for damn near 40 years. Good job, bro. Fighting your ghosts.
Republican president stood up in front of a Russian autocratic leader and said, Gorbachev, tear down this.
If you think Gorbachev was an autocrat, if Gorbachev was an autocrat, the Soviet Union would still be a thing. Gorbachev was not an autocrat.
Wall. And what is Trump going to be remembered for? I really love Vladimir Putin. Zelensky's a dictator. You're my friend. You and I both visit VA halls. And occasionally we meet a World War II veteran. In my state, there are some incredible men that still wear their hat. And if they can, they stand with pride. They are called the greatest generation. And what are we doing to their legacy? What are we doing to their legacy, Chris Coons? I'm going to keep talking unless somebody wants to say, will the senator yield for a question?
Will the senator yield for a question? Will the senator shut the fuck
I
up?
yield for a question while retaining the floor.
First of all, thank you so much for what you are doing, Senator Booker. You are drawing our nation's attention to what Donald Trump and Elon Musk and Doge are seeking to do to our country, especially the most vulnerable in our society. And you, Senator Booker, you have been a champion for the poor,
A champion for Israel.
disabled, for those most in need throughout your entire life.
No, you haven't.
That is who you are.
Why are you lying?
You are absolutely a champion for those who need help the most. So as we look at what Donald Trump is proposing, to destroy the Department of Education, just to level it,
Will it destroy my student loans
knowing
too?
that Title I money goes to the poorest children in Newark, in Boston, so that they can have as close to an equal footing as is possible so that they too can compete to ensure they enjoy the American dream. To gut Medicaid, knowing that there's 338,000 people just in Massachusetts alone who are on disabilities, who need Medicaid in order to deal with those afflictions which their families need a little bit of help to deal with. To begin a process of saying that Social Security is a Ponzi scheme.
Yes.
And knowing that ultimately they need the billions of dollars for the tax breaks for millionaires and billionaires. And they have to get it out of education. They have to get it out of Medicaid. They have to get it out of veterans benefits. They have to get it out of Social Security. We know what their plot is. The plot is to get $2 trillion out of the programs that affect ordinary people in order to have tax breaks for the wealthiest people in our nation. And most of it will come out of health care. It'll come out of Medicaid, ultimately out of Medicare, out of the Affordable Care Act, out of veterans benefits, health care, health care, health care, health care for every family, for the wealthiest in our society who don't need a tax break. The one thing they don't need right now is a tax break, especially when Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and Jeff Zuckerberg now control more wealth than the bottom 50% of our nation combined.
Mark Zuckerberg,
Did they
you
really need a
idiot.
tax break? I mean, I know the president put him right behind him at his inauguration, but, oh my God, the cabinet sits behind billionaires?
Yeah, that's
The
their
founding
purpose.
fathers are spinning in their graves,
No, they're not.
thinking about how they've inverted what is supposed to be the way in which our government, our country works. So I thank you.
The founding fathers would be billionaires today. These people were slave owners and wealthy merchants. Why the fuck would you? Why are you acting like the founding fathers was like some proletarian heroes or something? This country was literally founded by slaves. The founding fathers owned slaves. Why are you? The schools need to be open. Some of the most powerful men in the world do not know the foundations of their own country.
For your incredible leadership. You are putting the spotlight on what is going wrong in this country right now, this oligarchy seeking to take over our nation.
You're part of the oligarchy, you idiot.
So I thank the senator for what he is doing. It is just so consistent with his whole life, what he stands for. What he stands for on the floor of the Senate today, a conscience for the nation. So can the senator tell the Senate?
So the purpose of having this old dude there is basically to fucking suck Cory Booker's dick. That's his job. He's just there to glaze his dude. It's not even a concept. Like, this isn't even a real filibuster. This is just yapping.
Senate today, the nation, what this could mean if we continue down this path of Donald Trump and Elon Musk and Doge for those families who need help the most in our society.
I so appreciate the senator, and I want to tell folks, when I wrote my book, I thought I knew this man here, but I did a lot about environmental justice in my book. I did about a lot of these toxic chemicals out there that are threatening our people. And I came to the Senate one day, so humbled, because I told him I knew you as my colleague. We both got here around the same time. But I had no idea of the kind of things you did in the United States House of Representatives, how many bills that made a difference for people's lives in Boston and in Newark and Camden and Passaic. You are one of the people that, after a few years here, I discovered in 2015, writing my book, how amazing your career is. And now, having served in the Senate about the same amount of time,
Oh, go fuck already.
I'm so grateful for you. And you have been so consistent in why you came here, not forgetting the people you've been fighting for your whole career. And so your question is right aligned with that point.
No, I have not heard of Emily Pike.
Said earlier about
Who is Emily Pike?
This humanity's biggest fight, humanity's biggest consistent theme, us versus them or just us. I don't like when we pit one group in this country against another group.
You just raved about an
It's not us
oligarchy.
versus the
That's a group.
billionaires or us versus the Republicans. It's understanding what is best for we the people. How can we create a more perfect union? And I will tell you this right now.
Oh my God.
We are a union in trouble. Compared to our global peers, we have higher
I don't know.
disease rates.
China
higher
seems to be doing
diabetes
pretty well.
rates, higher cancer rates, higher maternal mortality rates, higher premature birth rates, higher infant mortality rates. There are so many things going on in this country that should not go on. But yet we are a nation of utter abundance. We are a nation of incredible wealth and resources. And we've proven in our past to be a nation of incredible vision.
When?
And that's why I don't understand why we are playing so small, why we have a president that is playing so small. It's not coming here like presidents of the past and saying, we together, from Reagan to Clinton to Obama, there's a big challenge, America. We together are going to get into the room and do sausage making, Republicans and Democrats, and we're going to find a way to write great legislation. Whatever you want to say about Joe Biden, he was a big president because he didn't try to do things by executive fiat, or as a quote of Donald Trump's I put here, the primacy of the executive, ignoring our Constitution.
The Constitution
You know
is not worth the fucking parchment it's written
I see
on.
another dear friend of mine, Mark Warner. You know how many bipartisan bills Mark Warner was at the table for? My senior senator who's chairman of Intelligence.
That's an oxymoron.
We did bipartisan infrastructure act when Trump in his first term had infrastructure week every other week. We did a chips and science bill. He's trying to claw back the money, but we together, I still remember that skiff, that classified skiff where the whole Senate was there and our national security team and Gina Raimondo put forward the crisis in our country, the vulnerabilities, and we came out of that room, we got into our rooms, and we hammered out a great chips and science bill. Decades went by in this body with doing nothing on gun violence. Decades, and courageous people on the Republican side, friends of mine that surprised me, that stood up like Senator Cornyn and said, we're going to do something. I've got my lines, you've got your lines, but let's find the space in the middle. And we did programs, and if you come to New Jersey, the community violence intervention money is lowering murder rates in places like Newark by over 50%, helping to get it done along with our great law enforcement officers. And the incredible thing about that now is Trump is trying to claw back that money, violating the separation of powers, because we decide how we're spending money in America, not the executive.
Trump is defunding the police? Why are you angry at that?
And so you and I both know that a big president would come to here and say,
Trump is one of the biggest presidents you've ever had. The dude is like 6'3",
John McCain, and I read to
300 pounds.
in the middle of the night. But John McCain, it's really important. John McCain, I won't read it, but I'll
Why do
tell
you keep talking about that dead motherfucker?
voted against the health care.
He's dead. He's been dead for
the
like
taking away of health care for
8
millions of
years.
Americans.
John
and said
McCain
that
is not
because
going to
of the
save
dysfunction
you.
of this body that we don't come together and do something bigger and bolder to provide better health care, to bring the ideas from both sides and expand the opportunities for Americans and replace the imperfections of the Affordable Care Act with smarter and better things. Not Donald Trump. He's repeating why the mistakes, but not with the ACA, which affects tens of millions of Americans, with Medicaid, that affects 70 to 100 million Americans. Why? You ask why? Well, we know why. There's two things that this will achieve. Two things. One, as you said it, it is because he wants to not just renew the Trump tax cuts, but expand them that have disproportionate benefits to the wealthiest. And I wish the wealthiest in the country, names that we know, people like Elon Musk would say, I don't want a tax cut. I wish he would say the truth.
Why would he do that?
I don't need a tax cut. But no,
Wish
that's one of the
casting.
reasons
Why would he?
he
Why
wants
would
to
Elon
remove
Musk not want a tax
program
cut?
that gave disproportionate
The
money.
rich
That's
are
not
by
the only
nature
reason.
greedy, bro.
There's a cruelty in what he's doing. It's so offensive. He seems to have no respect for people with disabilities. He made fun of a journalist with a disability once.
Okay,
he
so
seems to have no respect for people who are working hard and struggling but still can't.
so this dude is basically acknowledging what everybody knows. He's acknowledging shit that everybody knows. And what exactly are you going to do about it? What exactly are you going to do about it? Like you're naming all of these problems. Trump does not like people with disabilities. Elon Musk is greedy. None of these people give a fuck about you. New York is a shithole. Newark is a shithole. So what are you going to do about it? Like, I see no policy proposals. I see nothing besides just standing up here and whining. Then you got these old motherfuckers out here in the audience. Like, you're literally just standing up here talking to 3 people. And they're all just glazing. Oh, yeah, I remember when Reagan came up here and said, okay. Of course, billionaires don't have any empathy. That's why they're billionaires. Do you have any idea how fucked up you have to be? How many people have to die for somebody to accumulate a net worth of $1 billion? Do you have any idea how large an amount of money $1 billion is? Granted, most of it is tied up in stock, like it's not liquid, but still. Like, you have to screw over a lot of people. Every great fortune is made by a great crime. So you're up here talking all of this shit. Like, this is the United States Senate. These are some of the richest people in the country. What's Cory Booker's net worth? Let's look it up. Cory Booker, net worth. Cory Booker is worth $15 million. So you're the 1%, bruh. You're the 1%. Like, what exactly are you going to do? Because you're part of the problem that you're talking about.
Make ends meet. No respect for people that are afraid of his language, of his threats. They think that what he's doing to Social Security might mean they don't have it, that what he's saying to Medicare and Medicaid are lies because he's got more registered lies than any president of my lifetime. They don't think they can trust this president not to hurt them because he already is. And so I was told by my parents what defines you as a person is not what happens to you, but how you choose to respond. What happens to us as a nation is not what happens to us. They can bomb us from Pearl Harbor to attack us at 9/11. The American character was defined by how we responded to those crises. And yes,
America brought both of those things on itself. America and I meddled in Afghanistan and stupidly funded the Mujahideen to fight the Soviets. Then, like, Cory Booker is a big fan of foreign policy meddling. So if you hadn't been such a big fan of foreign policy meddling, then, we wouldn't have been hit on 9/11 because the people that we funded and armed and organized would not have existed. Pearl Harbor was because we cut off the Japanese oil and rubber reserves in the Pacific, and they kind of needed that stuff for their own imperialism. So if we have just let people the fuck alone, then none of this shit would have happened. So Cory Booker he's contradicting himself. Like, you want all of this nice stuff, but you continue to promote meddling across the entire fucking planet. That doesn't lend itself to a strong, stable society. That doesn't lend itself to a country that people like. Like, ask people in the third world what they think about U.S. aid. They don't like it because it's American meddling in their national aspirations. Like, nobody wants America in their business. Nobody wants America in their face. Nobody wants America in their shit. Until you realize that, you are going to suffer and you're going to be wrong. You're going to be in this circus that I'm building. I'm going to name it Cory Booker's Circus, because that's where you belong. You're just a fucking clown. Black clowns and white clowns. That's what's happening.
there have been major political crises before, but we responded by bending the arc of our nation more towards justice.
If you quote
Taking
Martin
care of
Luther King
more
one
and
more time.
People saying that we
You're not Martin Luther King, bro.
belong to each other in America. It is we the people. It is we the people. I see the standing of my friend, Mark Warner. I don't know if he has a question, but I know what I'm told to say if he asks me to yield for a question.
Will the senator yield for a question?
I yield for a question while retaining the floor.
Well, Mr. President, let me join my friend and colleague from Massachusetts. One, to celebrate the senator from New Jersey's endurance, his willingness to continue to make this case in as clear terms as possible. Not having been here last night at 6:30, I do wonder when he started this speechathon at 6:30, whether the bob and the weave and the move was quite as strong, or was he firmly attached to the podium. The fact that you are going on more than 12 hours now and look like you've got hours ahead and hours before you sleep, and knowing that there are other members who've got a question, including the majority leader. I just want to be brief with mine. You've talked a lot with great passion about the damage done domestically. As chairman of the Intelligence Committee, now vice chairman, I have been aghast at the sloppiness of this administration time after time after time in terms of their treatment of classified information. First 2 weeks of the administration, strangely, a couple hundred CIA agents' identities were revealed on a non-classified chain. These probationary employees, means new employees, the American government had spent a couple $100,000 on each of them. You got to get a security clearance, you got to get them trained. Unfortunately, these folks can't deploy abroad. They can't deploy undercover because their names were carelessly put on an unsecured channel.
How is that bad?
If you say, well, that was just a one-off. Well, what about a week or so later, the Doge boys, they print a whole list of federal properties that should be for sale. They quickly take it down a few hours later, realizing they once again have screwed up. But in putting up that list, they put on classified dark sites.
It's nice to have choices, isn't it?
That the American government, again, spends millions of dollars to protect. Or more recently as well, the Doge boys, either ignorantly or maliciously, either one just plain stupid, put out the list of a classified agency, its budget, total head count, again, all classified information. And Senator, one thing I can tell you, and I know you know this as well, if this had happened to a line intelligence officer or a line military officer, there'd be no question. Your butt would be fired. Matter of fact, we got information yesterday there had been a DHS employee who had inadvertently put a journalist on a chat line. Guess what happened? The guy's fired. So when it came to this incident, now called Signalgate, or Signalgate fiasco, where you've got the leading members of this administration debating where and how we should bomb the Houthis, including specific information of
the Houthis. Why can nobody?
It's nice to have
Houthis.
choices, isn't it?
Houthis.
Choices
It's
like
not that hard.
continue-
It's not that hard to pronounce. Houthis. You gotta stop the Houthis. That sounds like a disease. A childhood disease.
who will be hit and when. Senator Booker, I was down in Hampton Roads this week, and these were the communities that surround the Norfolk Naval Station. Norfolk Naval Station is where the Truman, the aircraft carrier, has been deployed from. It is the aircraft carrier that the flights that attacked the Houthis flew off of. I can tell you one thing, Senator Booker. These people were pissed off that there'd been this level of carelessness about their loved ones that if it had gotten in the wrong hands would have cost American lives. So, Senator Booker, as you put down the litanies of all of the challenges that have been raised by this administration. I'll ask you a simple question. Do you agree that this pattern, not one-off, pattern of sloppiness endangers our national security?
Yes, absolutely, yes. I love that you gave that litany, Senator. I have benefited from your leadership on the Intel Committee. You are one of the people that when things go down on the planet Earth, you're one of the small handful of people with the highest security clearance here, you know, before rank and file senators do. And we've had so many conversations about threat matrices and what our enemies are doing. You've sent me to the
You
SCIF
don't
and said,
understand
I can't talk to
any
you
of
about
them.
this. Go down in the SCIF and ask for the information and help me to fill out my understanding of national security threats. I am stunned by this president. All that I've read in the SCIFs about what Russia is doing to this country, I am stunned and angry by this president and what he is doing to us.
What about what
cozying
America's
up
doing to
Putin
Russia?
And turning his back on our allies. But
So if we are the most powerful country in the world, then why, like, what is it with this endless victim mentality? Like, what about what we're doing to Russia? What about what we're doing to China? What about what we're doing to all of these countries? What about what we're doing to Yemen? What about what we're doing to the people of Palestine? Like, there's no accountability here. There's no discussion about how we're actually fucking over the rest of the world. It's just, oh, well, how dare they? Hey, bruh, you can't just sow the wind and not expect to reap the whirlwind. That's what's going to happen to you. Leave people the fuck alone. Like, do you want a world-spanning U.S. empire? When you have an empire, people are going to come fuck with you. Why? Because they don't like being fucked over. If America had just left these people alone, if America had left the rest of the world to its own devices, or if America had actually upheld the cause of right and justice, as in the case of the Palestinian people, if we had actually backed the Palestinian people, we would be loved. But because we keep backing the objectively wrong, the objectively evil side, Pinochet, Netanyahu in Israel, the fucking dictatorial regime in Saudi Arabia, because we keep backing these evil-ass people, that's why the rest of the world hates us. That's why. You're a smart man. You're a smart man, but you're so fucking dumb.
the sloppiness, the unqualified leaders that he's put in place, it has caused us to be more at risk. And the signal gate, you said it. If that had happened under any other president, Republican or Democrat, whoever controlled the Senate would have hearings. They would want to know, was this pattern in practice? Did these signal conversations happen before and we only know about this one because it's somehow you pulled in a journalist? Well, that's a violation of the law because they're disappearing messages. We're destroying government documents that the executive branch has a legal obligation. And the classified materials, putting it out there, first saying, oh, there was nothing classified about that, lying, and then they put out the actual, said, okay, if there's nothing classified, they release the whole thing. And to the wisdom of people like you, and again, more wisdom and experience at Intel than me, it's clearly that was sensitive, probably classified, but we should be having hearings and accountability. I keep going back to how this document is being undermined and attacked by this president. And one of the powers and responsibilities that we swore to uphold, every one of us swore to uphold this, was that we are to be a check on the administration. Before I yield to the next question from Senator Schumer, I want to talk about Senator Schumer. I just want to say something, get it off my chest.
He's a lying
Senator
piece
Murphy,
of shit.
We've passed the 15-hour mark. I want to thank Senator Murphy in particular because he's been with me the whole night. He hasn't left my side. And in some ways, the debt's repaid. We passed 15 hours because we called Chuck Schumer 9 years ago. 9 years ago. I remember exactly where I was standing when three of us were on the phone and we asked Chuck to help us for you to take the floor right down there and do a filibuster. We didn't know how long it was going to last, but I committed to you that I would be your aide de camp. 15 hours you stood, Chris Murphy, saying that this nation shouldn't do business as usual for the Pulse massacre. And the leader of the Senate 9 years ago said, I support you guys, go ahead. And so one of the first people I called Senator Schumer and talked to about this actually was Murphy. And he did full circle for me and has been with me the whole 15 hours. His debt is paid, but I got fuel in the tank, man. And the only reason you stopped wasn't because you couldn't go on anymore. It was because we got a concession from Mitch McConnell. We got a concession to get 2 votes on common sense gun safety that Republicans had put forward, like universal background check.
You know, enough. I'm not listening. I've listened to almost an hour of this. I can't. This is, if you want to run for office, this should dissuade you from doing so. Because when you run for office and if you win, this is what you're going to have to subject yourself to. This is what you're going to have to subject yourself to. Don't run for office. I'd rather spend the rest of my life in fucking prison than listen to 12 hours of this shit. Let's do a little palate cleanser. Let's listen to what Ban Empanada has to say about why liberals claim to be leftists.
Interesting how so many people who clearly are not actually remotely on the left and are in fact just centrist liberals, nonetheless really want to appropriate that label for themselves and anyone who is actually on the left as basically some sort of crazy idiot. Let's talk about that. Here's a great example of it. The left always loses and it has to change. Say a whole lot of influencers whose opinions are best described as, "This is bad for your cause," says person who is against your cause. Now, if we take this statement as true, which to be clear, it's not, as many groups of people of varying size that could be described as having leftist ideologies have won resounding victories against often incredibly impossible odds in modern history. So first, what is the left? This is something that is difficult to describe in detail, so I'm not going to bother. I'm just going to say, very broadly, the left is basically counter-hegemonic politics, at least as it exists today in the present world system. That's what it is. Opposition to the global status quo of capitalist imperialism. And no, I'm not just talking about right-wing attempts to appropriate that sort of rhetoric and aesthetic. So when you're fighting against overwhelming power like that, you are essentially attempting to unite the dispossessed, propagandized, and poor masses of the world against the very system that dominates the world and that puts them in the position that they are in. And in that situation, you are actually bound to lose a lot. A ton, in fact. Because you're not in a position of power. You're starting from basically nothing, and the people who you are opposed to have everything they could ever need to prevent you from succeeding. So of course you're going to lose a lot, especially since your ultimate victory can only ever come with basically near total systemic abolition. And this is hardly something to criticize, hardly something to use to mock others who are supposedly on your side, as this simply comes with the territory. You fight against power, you're going to take some powerful blows in return. It's normal. People fought and schemed against monarchy for many hundreds, if not thousands of years as well. Yet I couldn't imagine a supposed good faith critic who's actually on the side of those anti-monarchists, mocking them for supposedly being huge losers who just can't win because of some sort of flaw with how they operate or what they believe, or because they dared to try and fail against impossible odds, or at least odds that seemed impossible until all of a sudden the whole thing came crashing down. So quite simply, Natalie Wynn and others like her are not on the left, not at all. Not even close. Nor is she someone who wants to see the left win, as she implies. She in fact wants the exact opposite to that. She is someone who is interested in liquidating the left, in everything but name, and then appropriating that name, that branding, for the status quo. The result of the thinking and prescriptions of the many people like this are always the same. The supposed left, for them, is presented not as an actual political framework, as a set of principles to abide by or aims to aim for, but rather it's like a sports team, and it's simply using the wrong tactics. In order to succeed, it needs to start using tactics that are closer to those that have already proven to be successful, like being closer to the status quo. So if the left is to start winning, it needs to be more and more hegemonic. It needs to stop being against the dominant system and being more for it. It has to make concessions to the status quo. It needs to become a part of the system itself. But the left is not a sports team, so to treat...
A lot of people in DSA make this exact same argument, like, oh, you guys need to stop talking about resistance and escalation, and there's 2 trends I've noticed on the left. It's the movementist march every fucking day left, and there's the electoralism strategy left, the people that want to just buckle down and win power at the local and state level. And again, like as Martin Suster said, there's various ways, various tactics. Every tactic that builds our power is useful. Like I used to say that we should not engage in elections whatsoever, but after study and like actually observing some of these campaigns, I realized that was an ultra-left position to take. But you make a mistake when you see a tactic as being the sum total of strategy. Like, can the left in the United States support an armed movement right now? Absolutely not. It would be crushed. It would be destroyed. People would be massacred and end up in prison forever. And again, revolution requires sacrifice, but stupid sacrifice that does not advance the movement, that is not the type of sacrifice that we should be encouraging people to make. So, while every tactic has a time in which it could be used, we have to be very, very careful before we just like be like, oh yeah, this is a strategy forever, because that's undialectical. Nothing is a strategy forever. Let's see what else our Greek Australian crash out friend has to say.
Treat it as you would your, like, city name sports bears, as people like this very much would like you to, just out to sort of win for the sake of winning. Is it a man for the left
This is Tropico.
to abandon everything that actually makes it the left? Because the left is not a team that is out to win the championship, which to people like this is just helping the US Democrats win the latest election. And literally nothing else in the world exists. Not another country, not another political race, nothing. So if what you value is just being on the winning side, rather than actually fighting a world genociding system and its beneficiaries and advocates and representatives who will defend it to the death, then you should just join the side of the American empire. Rather than pretending to be against it, but just being pragmatic in your means and ending up being a part of it, as people like this do. And Natalie Wynn provides us with an excellent example of how to do that, as she factually does exactly that. She's a good pal of arch-imperialist, genocidal war criminal Hillary Clinton, showing quite clearly where her political prescriptions actually lead, right into one side of the American empire's two-party system. Wow, great leftism. So her goal is not to help the left win or whatever. Her goal is to move you from the left to the center, to get you operating within the confines of the status quo.
Her goal is to move you from the left to the center. I really like that. I'm going to use that a lot. Like, when you engage as strategy with Democrats, with these types of people who really do not give a fuck about imperialism, that's exactly what they do. They move you from the left, from the hard left, to the center. Like, people keep saying, oh, you'll mature as you get older, or you've gotten a lot smarter since you've joined DSA. No. What their version of smart means centrism. Like, they don't want you on the hard left because the hard left is a threat to their jobs. It's a threat to their entire method of organizing. So, yeah. Thank you, Bad Empanada.
Make you no longer a threat to the system, and to assure you that you and her in this position will be those who are actually somehow challenging the...
What do I think about Bad Empanada's video on the Peruvian Communist Party? It's a stupid one. It's dumb. It relies on a lot of bad history, a lot of history that is produced by the Peruvian state and Cinderologists who generally are more reactionary than not. So, yeah, not a big fan of that. Everybody has the right to one L.
The system and all of its innate injustices, unlike those stupid loser leftists who lose by getting genocided by her friend Hillary Clinton and others like her. Stupid losers, why don't they just join the winning team like she did? So her goal is to make the left means something else entirely. She wants to appropriate the name for the system. Someone like this who has benefited so much from the present system that it's even gotten her direct connections to some of the most powerful and ruthless criminals at its head, that she can live a lavish life of producing one single substanceless video once every 2 years. Her class position is that of someone who has every incentive to push you towards maintaining the system that so benefits her. And that is precisely what she does. It's what's expected of her. She's no one special here. A drop in the bucket. There are countless millions upon millions of others whose job it is to do the exact same thing. And it's on you to prevent them from misleading you. Because if you're already here, then it's going to be because you either believe yourself to be in a position in which the current system doesn't work for you, or unlike Natalie Wynn, you care enough about other people to look beyond your own interests and try to help prevent the system from hurting others anymore. That makes you ripe for recruitment to this so-called left, and that makes you a danger to people like her and their class position. So her role is to take advantage of that, to reach out to people like you and convince you that you can somehow fight this system by becoming a part of it, by, joining the Democratic Party or whatever, by aligning yourself with the very butchers whose primary concern is and always will be maintaining it. But you obviously can't fight the system in that way. The way that you fight it is a whole lot more difficult than that, a whole lot less comfortable to think about than that, something that takes a whole lot more work than just doing that does. It's building something yourself, with others like you, rather than just being subsumed into the status quo, and changing absolutely everything about your actual beliefs and aims to the point that they are unrecognizable, in the name of simply winning. Don't let them lie to you. I don't like to cater to the extreme focus on Americans and the USA in these sorts of discussions, though it's kind of inevitable. So look, the entire reason that you guys are in the mess that you're in now, which for the rest of us isn't really much of a mess at all, it's because you have followed these sorts of prescriptions from people like this for many decades. When you could have been building up alternatives, you were instead working within the Democratic Party at the behest of supposedly real left influencers who are way better than those crazy far lefties, just like Natalie Wynn. It's all because instead of taking the time to build these alternatives, you just get swindled by these propagandists who convince you that the easy way out is actually the true way out. And then, shock, horror, the easy way out just subsumed you into the system, just made you another part of it, yet again. Wow. So if you really want to stop losing, if you really want to stop allowing these people to turn you into another cog in the wheel of the status quo, stop doing that. Because even if you did follow the prescriptions of someone like Natalie Wynn, and you join the Democratic Party and, I don't know, maybe you canvass and you help them win a presidential election, that wouldn't be a win for the left at all. It would be a win, in fact, for the exact opposite of what you originally stood for. That can, in fact, only ever be a loss for the left. Remember that.
That was refreshing. You should focus more on making videos like this instead of getting involved in silly drama. On the other hand, sometimes the silly drama has an educational value.
Took his body to the medical facility
Let's go back to Anansi.
on the main campus to be autopsied there. And an upswell of student activity began brewing as students gathered en masse at Sadist Kilo campus the next day. By 12 p.m. Monday, over 1,500 students had gathered, carrying signs condemning the murder of Tilahun Jazar. When police later arrived at the campus to retrieve his body in order to bring it to his half-sister, another conflict ensued, as the students had their own plans to hold a procession and take his body to his father's home. Around 2:45 p.m., the bodyguard unit filed into the campus, took a position behind the assembled students, then charged with bayonets fixed. There was shooting, originating from the students according to the police report, but the only dead or wounded were students. The final tally had 3 students dead. Sipatu Wobne, a second-year student who was apparently chanting slogans over a megaphone at the time.
I didn't know that Ethiopia had its own version of Kent State. Like, if Ethiopia was a shitty dictatorship, as it was, like, where the fuck would the kids have gotten guns from? Like, that doesn't make sense. Like, you're telling me that this country is run by a dictatorial emperor, yet people are allowed to have fucking guns. Doesn't make much sense to me. Why? Because the kids did not have any fucking guns. Why are you lying?
Jamal Hassan, a second-year art student, and Abibe Berhe, a freshman in the physical science stream. 16 students were wounded. Also wounded on both legs was a Polish political science professor, Professor Soldrzynski. Ironically, very much a supporter of the regime. The military force managed to snatch away the body and hand it over to the police, who were waiting outside the gate, and the body was carried in an ambulance to the outskirts of the city for immediate transport to Tilahun's birthplace in Maichu, southern Tigray, where it was buried on Tuesday, the 30th of December, in the presence of some 500 people, including his half-sister and the governor of the province, Ras Mengesha Seyon. Baru Zulu, the quest for socialist utopia. In the end, 27 student organizers were identified and arrested, and the students and faculty were left in chaos. The faculty were particularly frustrated with the situation, as their own staff were injured by police, as well as students, and they also had not been aware the raid was going to happen in the first place. This was in addition to the significant amount of school property destroyed by the police. The student response was delayed by the fact that many were left unsure what to do. Non-state affiliated student unions were banned, as were student publications, leaving few avenues for struggle. Some opted to leave Ethiopia in exodus. Some refused to boycott classes and returned to normalcy, hoping for an end to the violence. And
Can't do
others
that.
began seriously discussing the continuation of struggle in a more militant form. Such continuations are beyond the scope of this essay. Instead, we will discuss a methodology of resistance. With a brief history of the Ethiopian student movement complete, here are 5 lessons that American students can take and act on from the Ethiopian student movement. 1. Organize your campus. This is a big and quite daunting step, I won't lie. Book clubs and reading groups work well to bring groups of like-minded students together, but it's important that they graduate that stage, no pun intended. In order to really make progress, Ethiopian students started off with reading groups and writing clubs, as well as utilizing student unions and student administration groups as a method of organizing classmates, but moved on as the movement demanded it. The use of Ethiopian student groups on other campuses worldwide also made it easier to spread their messages internationally and gain attention for the Selassie regime's violence. Many students today aren't even fully aware that organizing in a political sense is even possible or something they're capable of. Whether that organizing is in response to your campus's investment in the Israeli government's genocide or participation in harmful policy on or off campus locally. Additionally, the Ethiopian students made a point to organize alongside their teachers as well. Students and teacher unions should strive for solidarity in co-optive organization efforts. This solidarity was a necessary step in swaying the school administration's ability to hinder both student and teacher protest activity. Establishing joint direct actions and protests, liaisons, and organizing teach-ins with high school students and with teachers is a great step toward bringing unity to all of these groups and moving toward this goal. Number 2, break containment. The Ethiopian student movement's strength came from the fact that while the campus brought students together, it was not the crux of their entire organizational capacity. This is the point I was getting at earlier when I said that the sweeping of encampments is not necessarily a problem for the movement. Oftentimes, the Ethiopian students were shut off campus entirely or faced suspensions and expulsions. When this happened, they took their protest to the streets. The American student encampments were, in my opinion, always going to be swept by the police and destroyed.
This is probably the most cogent point that the comrade has made. Like, this was something that was really that the ruling class, the administrators at Columbia, were really afraid of during the struggles of 1969. They were afraid that, because if you know anything about Columbia University, it's smack dab in the middle of Harlem. So what they did not want was a struggle over this gymnasium that they were trying to keep the community out of. They, meaning the administrators, they did not want it to spread to the streets of Harlem, because then that would have resulted in struggle both on and off campus. So what the ruling class does not want is people who are not on campus to become involved in the struggle that's taking place on campus. That's why you have the people that run these universities. That's why you have them shutting the gates of the university. That's why you have all types of struggles of that nature, trying to control who can and who cannot be on campus. So really cogent point.
It was never a matter of if, but simply when. This is okay though, because the power of the student movement, be it either in Ethiopia or America, is not the campus itself, but the connections that the campus, and the encampments especially, helped to facilitate. The encampments may be gone, but the students who formed connection and solidarity there can, and still do, in fact must, use the newly established networks, organizations, and connections to continue organizing when one method is shut down. This point is also why it was so critical that the Ethiopian student movement recruited and radicalized their high school student peers and worked with their teachers, who in turn radicalized their parents and families and helped them to push the movement further. Establishing links and solidarity with the wider community is vital for the student movement's survival on and off campus. This is also why the students organized with unions and even became part of unions, bridging the gap between the students and workers. We have begun to see mass radicalization of high school students in the US against both investment in Israel's genocide and against the new anti-migrant laws that are being pushed down the line by Trump's regime, with massive protests in LA being comprised of walkouts from the high schools. But these students will need direction and instruction from other more experienced wings of the community. It is vitally important that student orgs from all organized education levels are communicating and working together so that we are all stronger. Number 3, be water, both physically and strategically. Don't be afraid to abandon a tactic in favor of a new one. See what works and revise it if it doesn't. Like the previous
Anansi's library.
point also establishes,
Anansi is spelled A-N-A-N-S-I. Library is library.
we must be fluid with our tactics, capable of shifting to other modes of organization when needed. An encampment is only one style of protest, and while it has its benefits, it has its drawbacks as well, and we should be weighing our options and experience to decide what tactic fits a situation best. An encampment, a flash mob, a snake march, and a picket line are all valid, as are other forms of protest, but they all work at different times and for different reasons. The student encampments were so effective partly because their visibility and accessibility made it very easy for the wider community to engage with and get involved in the protests in a way that other tactics may not have facilitated. But it also left its organizers and participants far more exposed and vulnerable to attack and harassment, which leads me straight to point 4. Be prepared to face violence and meet it head on. What many students miscalculated and underestimated last year during the encampments was the presence of right-wing Zionist actors who attacked protesters and encampments with varying levels of intensity and the full sanction of the police. While some encampments faced the violence of the state and police, which used riot munitions and tear gas and other weaponry to disperse and attack students, some encampments faced a veritable three-way fight. The concept of the three-way fight comes from anti-fascist organizing history. In that history, anti-fascist protesters often found themselves in battles against Nazi counter-protesters and militias, and then the police as well. This principle became relevant once again in the 2024 encampments, as Zionist attacks took place either with the sanction of police or at the same time that the police happened to be making their own push. Many student encampments found themselves woefully unprepared to face violence, while others were more ready and able to defend themselves. UCLA faced some of the most intense Zionist interference. Multiple nightly confrontations with violent actors were supplemented by daytime harassment. It was literally 24 hours a day. Counter-protesters played Israeli songs on repeat and the sounds of children crying and screaming all throughout the night to disrupt our ability to sleep, while others harassed and shouted slurs over the fences. At night, this harassment would consistently intensify into violence and attempts to break into the encampment. By the night of the May 1st attack, UCLA's encampment walls had grown into a modular fortress, and it was still barely enough. On May 1st, 2024 at 10:50 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, roughly, a group of Zionist counter-protesters began attacking UCLA students and attempting to destroy the encampment. They used melee weapons, pepper spray, and explosives in order to attack students, throwing several fireworks over the camp's walls, nearly hitting people directly and starting fires in the camp. The police were called but did not arrive to aid the students. Instead, they watched as Zionists attacked the encampment in waves for almost.
I want to share something to the chat. The Physicians for Human Rights, they have a guide on how to protect yourself from tear gas. There you go. Let me pause this and I will read a bit of it to you guys. All right, so Physicians for Human Rights, they say, as people around the world take to the streets to protect against police brutality, they are often being met with violent crackdowns by law enforcement officers firing tear gas and other crowd control weapons. Deceptively known as less lethal, these weapons can in fact cause severe injuries and even death when used with excessive force. Same thing with rubber bullets. Like people talk, oh, they're not going to hurt you. They're rubber bullets. Like, no, it doesn't. Rubber bullet does not mean like literal rubber bullet like Nerf. It means like steel encased with a thin lining of rubber. And yeah, those things can fucking kill you. A person lost their eye and I believe eventually later died as a result of these rubber bullets, in air quotes. So less lethal does not mean not lethal. So these things can kill you and hurt you really, really bad. What to wear to protect yourself against tear gas and other chemical agents when protesting. Face mask. Scarves of bandanas large enough to cover your face from nose to chin can serve as substitutes for gas masks. Shatter-resistant eye protection to keep the shit out of your eyes, such as shatter-resistant sunglasses, swim goggles, or a gas mask. Clothing covering as much of your skin as possible. Comfortable, closed, protective shoes that you can run in. No sandals and shit. Avoid wearing contact lenses, which can trap irritating chemicals such as tear gas powder underneath. If you do wear contact lenses, keep a full facial gas mask or goggles on at all times. Avoid wearing makeup such as eyeliner for the same reason. What to bring to a protest. Water in your own plastic bottle with a squirt top to drink and or wash out your skin or eyes. A backpack or a drawstring bag rather than an over-shoulder or a crossbody bag in case you need to run. ID and emergency contact information. Consider writing this on your body. Cash for food and transportation or cash bail in case you are arrested. Check how much bail is in your location. An inhaler, your EpiPen, or several days of prescription medication in case you are arrested. A medical alert bracelet or information about any chronic medical conditions or allergies. And a change of clothes in case you are exposed to chemical irritants. So, basic tear gas aid.
Almost 5 hours before intervening in any way. I hesitate to call these Zionist actors civilian protesters. Their presence is more complex than that. These protesters were seemingly backed by a Jewish private security firm known as Magen Am. Magen Am not only has members trained directly with LAPD and provide police with training, many of their members literally are in the LAPD and also were seen in the crowds of civilians, quote unquote, that were harassing the encampment days before the attack. The presence of this organization's members, celebrity backing of the counter-protesters, and police refusal to protect the students smells of conspiracy. The Zionist attackers are more accurately described as a state-adjacent civilian militia. These kinds of attacks and harassment blindsided the encampments both in scale and organization. Zionist forces were not simply harassing the UCLA encampment, they were surveilling it, noting weaknesses in its walls days ahead of the clearly planned out attack on UCLA. The perpetrators of which have largely avoided any form of legal consequence and have even bragged about what they've done on the news. It is this violence which we should anticipate going forward and be prepared to meet. Protesters must be capable of and prepared to defend themselves before a situation arises that forces them to do so on the fly. Discuss safety plans and responses within both orgs, affinity groups, and friend groups. Have established and trained medics at hand, and do your best to carry your own personal medical gear, even if it's only to provide support and tools to someone who can use it better than you. Multiple encampments also held teach-ins where students learned stop the bleed courses and basic first aid. The UCLA encampment survived this attack because of its preparedness. The constant work both in securing the encampment via physical barricades and dedicated volunteer security from fellow protesters. The conversation of self-defense in this case must also transcend any pacifist sentiments or reservations about PR. Fascist attacks are deadly, and the last year and recent events show us that we must anticipate them or we will fall victim to them. The Ethiopian student movement also struggled with the question of violence, albeit differently. Theirs was a question of when to commit violence, not defensively but offensively. The onset of Eritrea's anti-colonial war for independence against Ethiopia fast-tracked this question's prominence, as many Eritrean students left their studies in Addis Ababa to fight for their home. It felt wrong for the students left behind to support the Eritrean liberation effort, but to abhor the violence that was required to make that liberation possible. And that feels quite familiar today. Ultimately, the question of violence was answered with a cautious but willing yes. It was less of a debate in the ESM, partly because by the time the ESM was in full force, it was quite clear, especially for the movement's founders, that violence was an eventual inevitability and even a goal. They knew and accepted where they were going long before they started getting there. Number 5, diversity of tactics. Protesters will often want to employ vastly different tactics in order to organize. This is okay. We do not necessarily need to all be in the same place, doing the same thing. In fact, sometimes it is best that we aren't. But I've seen arguments over tactics or protesters arguing about someone else doing something they don't like become distractions that weaken our solidarity and take us off mission from the protest's original goals. especially in situations where we are in active danger from threats far greater than someone protesting in a way that is ultimately not nearly as harmful as the violence we face if we are not paying attention to the people threatening us. These arguments are often either being hashed out at the wrong time or don't need to be had at all. Someone spray painting a wall is the least of your concern when you are under active threat from fascists and other attackers. Ultimately, we should seek to police each other as little as possible, and that also means not pressuring anyone to participate in forms of protest they aren't comfortable with or that are too radical for where they are in the moment. Ultimately, we all have each other's best interests and our political goals at heart. Therefore, we must embrace every form of struggle available. As we face the end of this academic year, the oncoming hot summer, and the next 4 years of political rot, we must move forward with intention, direction, and solidarity. It is vital that we continue to take lessons from the past and those who came before us, while also defining our daily new world for ourselves. I hope that this video taught you something useful. Be safe and be brave.
Okay. Yeah. What exactly did you disagree with? I mean, I think it's spot on. It's a really, really good summation of a practice that Comrade Nazi got through their engagement with the UCLA struggle. So yeah, I really didn't see anything that I hated. Ooh, second thought. No. First thought.
Continues without reform, I think there is a very real possibility of violence and potentially a split in the United States.
Yes?
The U.S. empire is collapsing. The world is already paying the price. Trillions of dollars wasted on endless wars with shifting goalposts and no exit strategy. Add to this a crumbling economic foundation and a desperate scramble to maintain global dominance, and what you have are all the familiar signs of imperial decline.
Hello. Orders?
Spain spent its silver on military campaigns it couldn't afford. Britain exhausted itself trying to hold on to its expansive empire. And now, the US is burning through resources apparently trying to speedrun the apocalypse. Empires end suddenly, but collapse slowly. The US is no different. It isn't just losing its grip on global power, it's setting the stage to allow chaos to flourish. The only question now is, how long will the world suffer for the US's sins? Before we dive in, we'd like to take a quick moment to thank our channel sponsor, Aura. And actually, it's a really important time to talk about them because hackers may have just stolen the social security numbers of every American. Over 2.9 billion records were recently stolen from national public data, which provides personal information to employers, private investigators, staffing agencies, and others doing background checks. These stolen records include a person's full name, address, date of birth, social security number and phone number, alternate names, and birth date. And members of the hacker group have released this information for free online. If you've never been the victim of a data breach before, let me tell you, it's not fun. That stuff is scary, as well as being very intrusive. If you weren't taking precautions with your personal information online before, this should be a huge wake-up call. You've never been more vulnerable online than you are right now. Thankfully, I don't have to worry about it, because Aura protects me from this exact scenario. Aura alerts me if they find my phone number, email, or social security number on the dark web. They let me know immediately if anyone tries to use this information to access my credit or bank accounts. And for added peace of mind, they provide up to $5 million in identity theft insurance should the worst case scenario happen. They also have a bunch of other features to keep you safe, all inside one app, so you don't have to go looking for a bunch of different services for your VPN, your antivirus, and your data security. You can use the link aura.com/firstthought to try 14 days absolutely free. That's plenty of time for Aura to find out if any of your personal data has been exposed. I highly recommend you do this right now, because not only is national public data not going to do anything to help us, they probably aren't even going to face any repercussions for this leak. I'm not leaving myself and my family vulnerable to data breaches. And if you don't want to either, you can go to aura.com/firstthought to try Aura for 2 weeks.
That's really good critique. Ultimately, we all have each other's best interests and political goals at heart. It's the part I have some reservations about. I think it's important to question the intentions of white liberals before working with them. honestly, my goal is to build up a movement that's strong enough so that what white liberals want or what white liberals think, it doesn't matter. Like, people give too much credence and too much clout to white liberals. Fuck them. Either they'll turn into revolutionaries or they will end up being driven out of the movement. Like, yeah, we all know that these people are dangerous. We all know that these people are aligned with the state. So this is where political education is important. This is why the comrade Anansi talked a lot about how like you have to be prepared to defend yourself. You have to be prepared to keep dangerous people like Zionists and liberals out of your movement. In certain instances, yeah, liberals may weasel their way into the United Front, but
Absolutely
we should never by any means allow them to dominate it. So
free. Okay.
definitely have to be wary of them.
Okay, back to the video. Many empires throughout history have come and gone, but two in particular stand out as being eerily similar to today. The Spanish Empire of the 16th and 17th centuries, and the British Empire of the 18th and 19th, which replaced it, the Napoleonic era aside. Then the US Empire replaced the British. So let's take a look at what lessons the US should learn from these former global powers. The Spanish Empire was mostly split between Europe and the Americas, which quickly pulled it into wars it could not afford. By 1619, the king's chief minister warned that overlapping conflicts had brought Spain to the brink. The king concocted a Union of Arms scheme, which aimed to mobilize 140,000 troops, an outrageous number for the time, across far-flung territories. Instead, the decree ignited local resistance due to the large burden it placed on townspeople and nobles alike. In 1627, the crown declared bankruptcy, obliterating credit and forcing steep interest loans. The following year, the Dutch seized an entire treasure fleet loaded with American gold and silver, which drastically slashed revenues and stalled military operations, followed by weaker silver shipments which further stalled military operations, and repeating on and on in a spiral of diminishing returns. And what did Spain have to show for this expensive, unending warfare? A lot of lost territory. They lost northern Catalonia, Portugal, Jamaica, and even parts of the Netherlands. Overwhelming debt, a hollowed-out domestic economy, and an unshakable faith in the idea that war was their best defense defined the Habsburg abysmal finances, with grandiose strategies that yielded nothing but loss. Philip IV spent 44 years mired in entirely optional conflicts against the Dutch, Germans, Italians, French, the British twice, and on the Iberian Peninsula, Spain's home turf. While Spain tried to retain its colonies, extreme climate events and earthquakes devastated Chile, Peru, and Mexico, only adding to the strain caused by the wars. The king's management of Spain's coinage was incompetent at best. Vellon coins, introduced in 1618, were silver coins that contained less valuable metals like copper, which debased the currency, adding to the inflation caused by a surge in silver imports from the colonies, which severely disrupted local markets and shrunk the crown's income. And even though silver shipments got leaner over time, silver still surged into Spain relative to historic levels of silver inflow which started the inflation. Silver became a sort of resource curse that stymied real growth. While Spain's GDP had once greatly outpaced other regions, it had fallen 40% behind those same regions by 1750. Though American gold and silver financed imperial wars, they bred illusions of prosperity that sapped the homeland's economic core. Earlier monarchs had brought the nobility to heel, but by the 16th century, the crown was drowning in high-interest debt. Spain's fragmented and inadequate taxes, coupled with entrenched conservative nobles, stifled modernization. Chronic debt defaults eroded trust while elites opposed any new taxes or reforms in order to protect their exemptions and status. These dynamics echo modern imperial overreach. A ballooning defense budget diverts funds away from essential investments like healthcare and infrastructure, leading to long-term instability. Now we'll move on to the British Empire, which, save for the whole Napoleon thing, was the empire to succeed Spain in Europe and possibly the first global hegemon. Despite losing the American colonies in the late 18th century, the British Empire would nonetheless grow and kickstart the first industrial revolution. But by the 1870s, global capitalism had begun to face a crisis. In 1889, a US analyst noted severe economic distress touching almost every nation on Earth, regardless of policies. Some might assume this would be a recipe for a major drop in production, but they'd be wrong. Production absolutely soared. Iron doubled, steel rose 20-fold, but profits lagged as tends to happen during capitalist overproduction. Before the stock market crash of 1929 took the moniker, the period between 1873 and 1896 was called the Great Depression, and it's easy to see why. Agriculture took the biggest hit. Wheat prices plunged nearly 2/3 from 1867 to 1894, which prompted Britain to abandon much of its grain farming. During this 23-year depression, the pound experienced significant deflation, which cut British prices by 40%, further eating into profit margins. New industrial processes rapidly produced far more in less time, quickly outstripping demand, which increased pressure on already falling prices. New protective tariffs sprung up across Europe and the US, leaving Britain's free trade stance vulnerable. Heavy industries began to form monopolies and oligopolies, in part to protect their profits, and chain retailers displaced small shopkeepers. With the glut in manufacturing at home, capital needed new markets. And since this is the 19th century, new markets is code for colonies. However, colonies are a short-term solution to a fundamental problem with the system in which they operate. And the fact is that thanks to the exploitative nature of the relationship, colonies eventually rebel. Cue the Second Boer War, fought between 1899 and 1902 in areas that now make up South Africa, and could be considered Britain's Afghanistan. High Commissioner Alfred Milner saw peace under defeat as a sign of Britain's declining imperial clout. And
there's this guy named Dennis Reitz, who Mandela was actually a big fan of him. He was one of the guerrilla leaders during the Second Boer War. But yeah. The character, well, I would characterize Britain's Afghanistan as being the Sudan, because they were actually like fighting colonized people. I wouldn't consider the Boers to be colonized people. The Boer War was an intercolonizer spat as far as the indigenous people of South Africa were concerned. If you're into Rudyard Kipling, he wrote a lot about both wars.
It's hard to disagree with that assessment. The problems experienced in South Africa were a sign that Britain was struggling to maintain control over the empire on which the sun never set. The war cost the British taxpayer over £200 million. That's £21.8 billion in 2024 terms, making it Britain's most expensive conflict since 1815, and which wouldn't be surpassed until World War I. By 1940, Britain's hold on its most prized colony, India, was crumbling. Of course, some cabinet members tried to hang on, but the situation forced them to issue a withdrawal announcement in February of 1947. Lord Mountbatten accelerated the partition timeline, discarding interim agreements and ensuring independence.
This guy, Mountbatten, he was assassinated by the IRA. Like, he decided he could go fishing in Ireland. He owned some castle in Ireland. And he thought, oh, I could go fishing, I'd be all right. And he ended up getting blown up on his fishing boat. Another funny thing, he ended up being cuckolded, like literally cuckolded, by the first leader of independent India, Jawaharlal Nehru. Nehru literally slept with dude's wife. And if you listen to some gossip mongers, he also slept with Mountbatten as well, but dude got around.
Independence by August, and relinquished authority even before revealing final boundaries. Both British elites and Indian nationalists saw their carefully laid plans dismantled by wartime exhaustion and near-constant domestic unrest. By 1948, Britain had granted independence to most of Asia, except Hong Kong, which it wouldn't give up until 1997, while the US grew to become the dominant Western power. By 1957, American influence had replaced Britain's over regions in which it once reigned supreme. Any remaining notion of British world leadership quickly waned, prompting faster decolonization to maintain Western cohesion. In both these cases, Spanish and British, spiraling military commitments and failing fiscal policies paved the way for new global powers, like the United States, to rise. Taking these previous empires' history as a rough guide to determining if the American empire is falling, let's see how many boxes the US ticks. In January of 2025, a massive sell-off of tech stocks erased around $1 trillion in capitalization at the opening bell, all because China released an app for free. It's difficult to overstate the historic nature of this crash. Apple alone lost $224 billion, Amazon shed $109 billion, and Nvidia briefly gave up over $300 billion before recovering about half that loss. By the close, Apple was down 4.8% and Amazon 4.1%. That's 162 billion and 72 billion respectively. Japan's Nikkei 225 plunged 12%, its worst day since 1987, and Bitcoin dropped 11%. Nvidia, once valued over $3 trillion after 3 consecutive quarters of over 200% revenue growth, fell to a measly 2.5 trillion. Goldman Sachs had warned that returns on AI spending would be minimal, and this is coming from one of the chief architects of the 2008 collapse. So if they are warning that something is a bad investment, it's probably best to listen, especially when major hedge funds called Nvidia's valuation part of an overhyped bubble. And they were right. The world watched a free app pop that bubble. We can't yet say what long-term effects this historic day will have. After all, we're still living through the shockwave. But the ghosts of empires past provide the US the knowledge to avoid similar pitfalls. Unfortunately, their pleas are falling on deaf ears.
I'll do it.
This crisis is, of course, a product of the specific material conditions we find ourselves in. But similar economic crises beset Britain in, for example, the First Great Depression. That historic Deep-Seek Day is representative of the high wealth concentration in the US, and is representative of the wealth distribution among the people, too. Current data shows the top 0.1% alone own 13.8% of total US wealth, with the rest of the top 1% adding 16.9% for a total of 30.7% of all wealth, while the bottom 50% are left to split a meager 2.4%. Government spending patterns reflect this imbalance. The 2024 National Defense Authorization Act dedicated $886 billion to the military, $28 billion more than the previous year, partly for Ukraine, surpassing the budgets of the next 10 countries combined, with at least half the country perplexed as to why the budget is so outrageously high. From 2000 to 2010, the Pentagon canceled the Future Combat Systems, the Comanche helicopter, and the Crusader artillery gun after already wasting $46 billion taxpayer dollars, which, as it happens, exceeds the total Environmental Protection Agency budget between 2015 and 2020. Yet resources still flow to Bradley tank prototypes, almost $23 billion so far, and ballistic missile defense, over $67 billion since the late 1990s. The F-35 program, at $1.7 trillion across its lifespan, has endured repeated groundings and crashes, and yet remains set to expand by 2,400 more jets in the near future. Inflation has been brutal in the last few years, which has added to the economic hardship. And the best news so far is that it dipped to 3% year over year in mid-2023, which is of little consolation to the 61% of Americans living paycheck to paycheck. The eggs are still expensive. Nearly 3/4 of those earning under $50,000, and 65% making $50,000 to $100,000. In other words, most Americans struggle with day-to-day expenses. Even 45% of those making over $100,000 also report living paycheck to paycheck. If it was most before, it's almost certainly a supermajority now. What's more, over half of adults say they are more financially stressed now than before the pandemic, relying on high-interest credit or limited savings to meet basic needs, which is absolutely unsustainable. And finally, despite having the supposedly most pro-union president in US history in Joe Biden, a dubious claim at best, union membership in 2023 stood at 10%, only 14.4 million workers, down from 10.1% in 2022, despite the media calling it the year of the strike. This is, however, merely the tail end of a long-term, slow decline. In 2003, 15.8 million workers were union members, or about 11.5% of the workforce, far below the 28.3% peak in 1954, and only slightly more than today. Businesses spent $4.27 billion on federal lobbying in 2023 alone, and at time of writing, the calculations for 2024 haven't been completed, but are expected to be similar. But that's $4.27 billion they could have been using to provide their workers higher pay and better benefits. But that, according to them, doesn't have as good an ROI as lobbying. On that note, we'll turn to US imperial overreach, which has seen a steadily worsening decline in effectiveness in accomplishing individual missions, let alone broader goals. It shouldn't be surprising by now to learn that, at time of writing, the US has spent over $8 trillion on post-9/11 wars, aka the War on Terror, and yet its actual global position is weakening by the day. Afghanistan ended in a humiliating, unorganized, and inhumane withdrawal. Iraq remains unstable, and the supposed strategic gains of both unnecessary military quagmires never materialized, and never will. Like Spain before it, the US is bleeding resources on endless conflicts that gain little, or even return losses. The economic foundation of US hegemony, the dollar's dominance, is eroding. The share of global reserves held in dollars has declined steadily as more countries move to alternative currencies and systems. The US share of global GDP and trade has shrunk, further weakening the dollar in international finance. Non-traditional reserve holdings have grown from $30 billion in 1999 to $1.2 trillion in 2021, which is indicative of a calculated strategy to shift away from dollar reliance, which has accelerated in step with the US's ever more erratic and unpredictable policies and actions. Right now, China holds the largest stock of these alternative reserves, followed by Switzerland and Russia. The foreign exchange market itself has changed in the sense that currencies that once required conversion through the dollar are now traded directly. The petrodollar system, established after the US finalized its abandonment of the gold standard in 1971, has artificially propped up global demand for the dollar for decades. Today, oil producers, like Saudi Arabia, are negotiating with other nations to do business in currencies other than the dollar. For example, China has signed energy deals with Gulf states using China's yuan, accelerating the transition away from the dollar. BRICS is the largest organized effort leading the charge in challenging this system. The economic bloc created the new development bank as a counterweight to the US-controlled World Bank used in conjunction with the IMF to project US economic power. South African officials have explicitly linked these efforts to bypassing US financial dominance and resisting its frequent and illegal unilateral sanctions. Sanctions are Washington's main tool for enforcing dollar supremacy. The practice is quickly losing its effectiveness. Russia has, in recent years, especially due to its war on Ukraine, been the subject of US sanctions. And yet, despite these sweeping Western restrictions, some of which targeted Russian energy exports and technology, their economy remains relatively stable. Western states, mostly in Europe, still rely on Russian energy. Belgium, France, and Spain continue purchasing large quantities of Russian liquefied natural gas. Even the US hesitates to cut off Russian oil completely, fearing market disruptions and price spikes that would benefit their geopolitical rival. Russia's economy grew 3.6% in 2023, after a contraction the previous year. Military production drove 60 to 65% of industrial output growth. But even sectors hit hardest by sanctions, manufacturing and retail, have rebounded. Russia's unemployment rate fell to 3.2% in 2023, the lowest since 1992.
That's one thing wars are good for, lowering your unemployment rate.
Projections for 2024 show continued growth.
Everybody's either in the army or they're making shit for the army.
Every Western attempt to isolate Russia economically. The sanctions have pushed Russia to strengthen ties with BRICS and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, deepening the global shift away from US economic control. They also forced Russia to replace Western imports with domestic production, strengthening key industries like shipbuilding and heavy machinery. Financial restrictions failed as well. After being cut off...
This is why it's fucking dumb to keep trying to fight with Russia. Because, like, this country is huge. It has a shitload of natural resources. Like, Europe is literally cooked by Russia's immense natural gas and petroleum reserves. Like, they can't just cut Russia off. They can't cut Russia off. Because when they do that, then they're going to put their own people in the dark. So Russia basically has Europe by the balls. So Europe, for all its big noise, for all of its sending old-ass Cold War era military equipment to Europe, they're not going to, to Ukraine, they're not going to cut Russia off. Because they need that natural gas. They don't want their people freezing in the winter and sitting up in the cold. So, yeah, Europe is never going to cut Russia off. Never, ever. And the sooner that America realizes it, the better. Just leave Russia alone. Just leave China alone. Like, I'm not a multipolarity bro, but we're in a multipolar world. We're in a multipolar world. Like, the U.S. and its running dog, the EU, is not the only players, the only dogs in the yard anymore. And you have to acknowledge that, and you have to acknowledge that in reality. Otherwise, you're not going to survive. You ain't going to make it.
From SWIFT, Russia expanded its own payment networks and increased ruble-based trade. Moscow's alternative to SWIFT, the System for Transfer of Financial Messages, or SPFS, has gained new members, further undermining U.S. financial influence. By early 2024, ruble transactions accounted for 43.9% of Russian export revenue. a sign of just how little the sanctions have achieved. The US assumed sanctions would bring Russia to its knees. Instead, they exposed the limits of American power. The dollar is losing ground, and the US no longer controls the global economy. The United States is repeating the failures of past empires. Spain drained its wealth fighting unwinnable wars, collapsing under debt and economic stagnation. Britain, too, overstretched itself, clinging to imperial dominance as industrial rivals surpassed it. The US is following the same pattern. $8 trillion wasted on post-9/11 wars, no clear strategic gains, and rising instability at home and abroad. The dollar's dominance is fading. BRICS nations are bypassing US financial control, and sanctions have failed to cripple Russia. Washington's ability to dictate global trade is fading fast. At home, record defense spending grows year after year, while corporations suppress wages and watch silently as inequality surges towards catastrophic levels. Empires don't collapse overnight. They bleed out slowly, often lashing out as the end nears in a vain attempt to recapture past glory. But there will be no glory to be found for the US. The immense power it still wields is held atop crumbling foundations. Without radical change, it will follow Spain and Britain into the history books as yet another empire with the hubris to think they can outrun the consequences.
Let it follow. Like, when this country collapses, black people will celebrate. Let it fall. Quit trying to do triage. Don't be a Cory Booker. Don't stand up and embarrass yourself for 12 hours to try to prop up this dying empire. Let it collapse. Let something better be built on its ashes. I'm Black Red Guard. See you tomorrow. Also, catch me Friday at 5. Since I'm unemployed, I get to stream like I want to. So catch me Friday at 5 o'clock when I am going to be interviewing a comrade from Omaha Tenants Union, aka the Maoist Tenant Union. Will you build a tenant union in your own city? Hopefully so. Comrade Seth will be here to help you figure out how to build a revolutionary tenant union where you are.